Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto is neglected by the family Uzumaki sword. Before I start, please support for more amazing content, and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Wacko12 and link in description and support writer. Let's start the video. Konoha 9 years after the Kyuubi attack. In the backyard of the Namake's manor, a party was taking place, birthday party by the looks of the balloons, presents stacked in a pile by the corner, and kids playing around. For today was October 10th, the day that the children of the Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namakes and Kushina Uzumaki were born. Mito Uzumaki Namakes and Naruto Uzumaki Namakes were their names. Despite it being the same day that the Kyuubi had attacked the village 9 years ago, the spirits of the party occupants, along with the rest of the village, was a positive one, as it was also the same day that their Yondaime Hokage, along with many other brave shinobi, fought and defeated the Kyuubi, saving the village. However, before it was said that today was the birthday of Mito and Naruto, but really the only ones being the center of attention was Mito, while Naruto was sitting on a tree branch that overlooked the backyard. The boy was almost a perfect replica of his father, with Minato's blonde hair and tan skin. However, he had his mother's purple eyes along with whisker marks on his cheek. Naruto just sat on the branch as he looked down from his spot sadly, as everyone else were having the time of their lives, with Mito getting dozens of presents. It all started 9 years ago, on this exact same day. The Kyuubi had been extracted from its host at the time, which was none other than Kushina Uzumaki, after she had just given birth to the twins. The culprit is a masked man, who claimed to be Madara Uchiha, and had succeeded in killing the ANBU guards and Kushina's midwives before separating Minato from Kushina after using Naruto as a hostage, and thus managed to take Kushina to an unknown location and release the Kyuubi. The Kyuubi, under the masked man's control, began attacking Konoha, causing massive casualties to both shinobi forces and civilians. While the fox was being held off by the shinobi, led by the Sandaime Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi and his two students Tsunade and Jiraiya, Minato was battling the masked man before successfully injuring him and cutting off his control of the Kyuubi. Once the masked man retreated, Minato headed back to aid the others and was preparing to make the toughest decision in his life, sealing the fox into one of his newborn children. It was a very hard decision, and the current situation did not help make it easier for the father. But after hard thinking combined with the pressure and fate of the village, Minato chose to seal the Kyuubi into Naruto. Once he decided, Minato took the Kyuubi to a location far away from Konoha in order to do the sealing process. What at that time is unknown, as Minato did not share what transpired, but the sealing was a success and Minato, Kushina and their children survived the whole ordeal. Afterwards would be the turning point of their lives. While Kushina and her children were sleeping at the hospital, recovering from the whole ordeal, Minato was meeting with the council, shinobi clan heads, civilians and elders alike. After explaining the mastermind behind the whole thing, and that the Uchiha clan had no part in it, Minato was soon asked by the warhawk Danzo a question he dreaded. What became of the Kyuubi? Minato told them honestly that the fox was now sealed within Naruto, though soon after he regretted doing so. While the shinobi side was merely checking that the seal was flawless, the civilian side was screaming things such as to have the boy killed or locked away, while the elders minus Hiruzen demanded that the boy be handed over to Danzo to be turned into a weapon. Of course, both were shot down, following 1 or 2 civilian council members being arrested and the loss of their seats. Minato made a law that no one of the younger generation was to know of Naruto's status, as punishable by death. Despite this, the civilians had spread word to the older generations of the new Jinchuriki. After so much loss and pain, the rest of the village began to hold resentment towards the newborn Jinchuriki, which continued up to this day. Despite the glares, insults and the rare assassination attempts, the Namake's family continued living a good life until the twins turned 5. Did the adults discover something? Apparently Naruto did not possess the unique chakra that Kushina had, which allowed the older Uzumaki woman to suppress the Kyuubi. In fact, their daughter Mito possessed the special chakra, perhaps even at a level greater than their mother. They soon began to fear that because Naruto did not have the ability to suppress the Kyuubi, that he might one day lose control of his emotions, freeing the Kyuubi. At the time, only the parents, Jiraiya, Tsunade and Hiruzen, knew of this piece of information. Naturally, they kept this a secret from the rest of the village. But somehow about a month later, though there were some guesses of how it happened, word of Naruto's inability of suppressing the Kyuubi spread throughout Konoha like wildfire. This made the village population scared that the Kyuubi could attack them again, while at the same time angrier at the boy and more desperate in their attempts to harm the child. It only got worse when the other parents, despite not being able to reveal Naruto's Jinchuriki status, told their children to avoid the boy at all costs and try to be friends with the Namake's child. Many greedy parents hoping for a marriage between their children in order to gain some control over the Uzumaki clan inheritance, and the Hokage too. Because of this, Naruto was ignored by everyone, well, almost everyone except by 3 people, Hinata Hyuga, Sasuke Uchiha, and Itachi Uchiha. Sasuke and Itachi were both the sons of Kushina's closest friend, Mikoto Uchiha. Itachi was 6 years older than Sasuke and Naruto, as well as considered a prodigy like Minato and Kakashi Hatake, Minato's only living student. However, despite this, along with the usual Uchiha stoic and arrogance, Itachi was very polite to people and was a kind older brother to Sasuke and, in a way, to Naruto as well. As for Sasuke, he and Naruto had more of a rivalry friendship but were on good terms nonetheless. However, Itachi had left the village a year ago when he was accused of killing a fellow clan member, Shursui Uchiha. Though no body was found and there was no solid proof that Itachi did it, there was also no proof that he was innocent. So he was labeled a missing nin and was to either be captured or killed when spotted, much to the anger of the Uchiha clan head Fugaku Uchiha, Itachi's father, and the grief of Itachi's mother, Mikoto Uchiha. This event also made Sasuke a little bit closed from everyone else besides his mother and Naruto sometimes, as he now felt like it was his duty to prove his brother's innocent, because he would never believe that his older brother, his idol, would do such a thing as killing a fellow shinobi. Then there was Hinata Hyuga, the heiress to the noble Hyuga clan. Naruto and Mito had originally met her when Hinata's mother, another good friend of Kushina's, met them at the park when they were 3. Mito had begun playing with some of the other children, leaving Hinata alone due to the Hyuga's shyness around other people. However, Naruto decided to play with her because she seemed like a nice person. That sparked their friendship, and so they would meet whenever they could. Of course, Hinata's father really didn't want them to play, since being the demon brat rather than the yandame's son, such interaction might bring more shame than praise from the rest of the village. However, Naruto and Hinata continued to play, and as they got older, trained too, sometimes with Sasuke. Speaking of training, Naruto had to do it secretly, and for his own safety. The former was because for some unknown reason until now, Minato and Kushina decided not to train Naruto but instead focused all of their attention on training Mito and becoming a ninja. In fact, they started when the twins were only 5. Despite all the begging to be trained as well, Naruto would always receive none, and would then be sent to his room as a timeout. However, Naruto was a bright boy and a sneaky one at that, and thus had been able to get his hands on some scrolls and do secret training on his own. He was even able to learn the shadow clones and one of his father's prized techniques, the Rasengan. As for the safety part, well, let's just say that Naruto needed more ANBU protection than his parents and his sister combined. Villagers and even some shinobi would sometimes try to beat him, especially if he wasn't with his family. Thanks to his training, he was able to hold back most of the assaults, mainly escape them, though it was difficult when shinobi were involved. Despite all that, Naruto had always hoped that one day he could truly be happy with his family, and the village would accept him. But that all changed 3 years ago when he had accidentally listened in onto a conversation between his parents and godfather, Minato's teacher Jiraiya, that toad sage. Back then, a 6-year-old Naruto had gotten up late one night to use the bathroom. After relieving himself, Naruto had noticed that the living room light was on, and there were 3 familiar voices in said room as well. Being curious, Naruto snuck downstairs to listen in on the conversation. What he heard was shocking. From what he could tell, his godfather was ranting, though quietly as to not wake Naruto and Mito, that Minato and Kushina were playing favorites between the twins just because Naruto's chakra couldn't suppress the Kyuubi's chakra. Naruto couldn't believe it. He had the Kyuubi inside of him. His own father sealed the fox that nearly destroyed the village inside of him? Was that why he was hated by the villagers and shinobi, and why his parents ignored him? Then the conversation got worse for Naruto when Minato and Kushina explained that they were concerned that Naruto might not be able to handle the Kyuubi's influence. If so, then Mito, with her special chakra and Fuinjutsu, would be able to keep Naruto in control if the day ever came. In short, as said by Jiraiya, Mito was basically Naruto's warden, something that greatly upset Naruto, not just because his parents were afraid but that they thought he was some kind of threat to the village and that his sister was supposed to keep him in line. His hope rose a little when Jiraiya brought up the question of just training Naruto to suppress and maybe even use the Kyuubi's chakra. However, Minato merely explained that they were thinking of letting Danzo handle Naruto's training, something that enraged Jiraiya and nearly causing him to shout. Naruto had seen the man named Danzo time to time, during when he and his sister would go with their father to work. There he would spot the bandaged man passing by, not even sparing his father a glance. Instead, the older man would look down at Naruto, his soul looking down at the boy as if he was a mere object that he wanted to obtain, not a human being. Combined with the dreadful aura around the man, Naruto made it a fact to avoid Danzo at all costs, and judging by how badly Jiraiya was reacting to what Minato, it was clear that Danzo was very bad news. It was at that moment that Naruto realized that he was no longer safe in the village, and no longer safe within his own home. He had to leave. But he knew that just running away without a plan was suicide. That and the fact that he wouldn't last a day in the outside world with mercenaries, wild animals and missing nin everywhere, followed by even getting past the guards around the village. So he decided to bide his time, train more until he could handle the world and at the same time scan the walls of Konoha, the guard shifts, anything that could help him in his escape. And now, after 3 years of planning, it was time. At night, the entire village would be celebrating the defeat of the Kyuubi, as well as forming mobs to find him, and security would be lax. Even his family would be there, meaning Naruto could just slip through the night unnoticed. With that thought in mind, Naruto shunned into house, finishing up the things he would need to bring with him. He paused as he looked at some paper, debating on whether or not to leave his family a letter. However, at the last second he decided not to. If they didn't care to give him attention, then they sure as hell wouldn't care if he were missing. But this also meant he couldn't tell his 2 friends that he was leaving as well, because there was the chance that his parents might find out. with Naruto later that evening. It had been several hours since then and Naruto was jumping through the trees, having already mastered the arts of tree climbing. However, he was also moving at a fast pace to escape his pursuers, 3 chunins by the looks of them, one of them being Mizuki, his former academy instructor as well as one of the more physically of his abusers. He had no idea how they spotted him leaving the village, but Naruto had no doubt in mind that seeing how the young blonde was leaving the village, this was the best chance they could get to kill him and not worry about suffering the consequences. What Naruto did not know however was in fact these 3 chunins were persuaded by Danzo, who had a root agent watch the boy for the past several years, of simply capturing the boy and then staging it to look like Naruto was killed, and in the event that they failed or worse, captured, then Danzo could deny all claims of having been involved with them. However, if they did succeed then Danzo would merely have them killed. One of them pulled out a kunai with an explosive tag attached to it, and threw it. The kunai impaled itself into a tree that Naruto was about to land on. When it exploded it knocked the young blonde off course and caused him to fall down towards the ground. Fortunately Naruto managed to slow his fall by hitting some branches though gained a few bruises as a cost. He finally hit the ground, causing Naruto to let out a gasp of air. The blonde tried to get up but the explosion and the fall left Naruto severely bruised, and despite the uzumaki blood and Kyuubi's chakra healing him, getting his senses together Naruto tried to get up but was sent back to the ground when a foot roughly stomped onto his back, causing Naruto to cough up some blood. Mizuki, don't damage it too much. Danzo-sama wanted the demon alive. One of the chunins murmured to the silver-haired chunin. Said chunin just smirked before twisting his foot deeper into Naruto's back, causing the young blonde to cough violently. I know, but it doesn't hurt to at least get some fun while we're here. After all, I doubt. Whatever Mizuki was going to say was cut off when the third chunin was suddenly cut in half vertically, causing the chunin to cough up a large amount of blood as his 2 halves fell to the ground. What the hell? Mizuki shouted as he looked at the body and then at Naruto, who was barely conscious at the time. Holy shit, did the demon? Then Mizuki heard a scream near him. He spun around and saw that the other chunin had a large slash on his chest, blood spraying out of the wound as the man fell to the ground dead, a horrified look on his face as he fell. Now panicking, Mizuki had all but forgotten about the injured blonde and was currently looking for some escape route or for the hidden attacker. Who the hell is there? Mizuki yelled as he waved his kunai wildly, just before something hit him in the back of the neck, knocking him out cold. Behind the fallen man stood 3 people wearing black cloaks and hoods that covered their body and faces. Get rid of the 2 bodies. The one at the front, obviously the leader, told the second person. While the second person was doing the job, the leader walked up to Naruto's still form. Bending down, the leader checked for any injuries but could already see them healing. Picking the boy up gently, the leader looked at the third man who was doing something to Mizuki before joining up with the leader and the second person, after the latter disposed of the bodies. Once they were set, they disappeared in a flash. Konoha the next day. It's surprising how someone who is either ignored or hated can cause such a fuss the next day after they leave. It was only sometime in the afternoon, after recovering from the wild adult party last night, did it come to Minato and Kushina that their son was missing. After checking his usually hangout places, which took them a while since they really didn't know where Naruto hanged out, and then asking the people he would be with, which were few, and then having members of the Inuzuka clan and several skilled trackers search the village for any signs of the boy, they finally came to the conclusion that Naruto was no longer in Konoha and either that he ran away or was kidnapped, both uncomfortable possibilities. So naturally they dispatched groups of ninjas to find Naruto, though a few might have been planning on killing the boy due to their biased belief of him being the Kyuubi. Hell, he even sent word to Jiraiya to keep an eye out for Naruto. 2 days later it was a team led by Kakashi Hatake that finally found some sort of clue of what happened to Naruto. Kakashi summons, Ninkins, had located the scent of 3 people, 1 alive and the other 2 dead. He soon arrived to see an unconscious Mizuki, and the ash remains of supposedly 2 other Konohanin. While checking the area for any signs of what happened, Pakken, Kakashi's most trusted Nikken, find a patch of recently dried blood and later identified it as Naruto's. And so I brought Mizuki back restrained to be questioned since he probably had something to do with Naruto's disappearance. Kakashi said to the Yondaime Hokage along with Jiraiya and Hiruzen Sarutobi. I've also sent the ashes to the hospital to verify of who they were, but it's most likely they were Konohanin too. Minato nodded, a solemn look on his face as he had his chin resting on his hands. We should already be getting a report from the IT department knowing Ibiki and Inoichi, the Yondaime Hokage commented. Were you able to track down Naruto with the blood? Minato asked hopefully. Kakashi shook his head, much to his sensei's dismay. No, we looked everywhere but couldn't find a lead. The only reasonable explanation that I can think of is that someone else took Naruto. Minato sighed, a crestfallen look on his face, as he knew Kushina would be even more depressed than she already was. But soon his attention was brought towards a knocking at the door. Come in, Minato said. The door opened and coming through were Inoichi and Ibiki, the latter with a file underneath his left arm. They both had grave looks on their faces as they bowed to both Hokages and Sannin. Anything? Minato asked hopefully. Ibiki and Inoichi exchanged looks with one another for a few seconds before looking back at the Yondaime. Well, from what we found involving Naruto's disappearance, He and 2 other chunins were definitely sent after Naruto, though whether to retrieve him or to kill him, Inoichi cringed as there was a slight change in the atmosphere from Minato's killing intent. When it died down, the Yamanaka continued. However, we have evaluated that he nor any other accomplices of his took Naruto away, as it appears he was knocked out from behind. But besides that, Ibiki walked forward and placed the file on Minato's desk. We found some shocking things inside Mizuki's head. Apparently, being a former Chunin Academy teacher, he had an important role for something else. Confused, Minato opened the file, with his student, sensei and predecessor looking over his shoulder. What they saw shocked them and made Minato narrow his eyes in anger as he growled. Danzo, miles away from Konoha, in an unknown location. Naruto slowly opened his eyes and he soon found himself in an unfamiliar room. The room was entirely blank with plain white walls, a table, 3 chairs, and a bedside table besides the bed Naruto was currently on. On the small table was a tray of food and drink set out. Ignoring the tray of food and his growling stomach, Naruto continued to scan the room, trying to find a clue to where he was. Where am I? Naruto asked himself. Suddenly a door opposite of him, that wasn't there before, opened and a person stepped in. The person was a man, tall, about the same size as Naruto's father. However, the man wore a black cloak and hood, covering most of his body. The only thing that wasn't hidden was his mouth, which showed a small scar running across his lip and tan skin too. "Ah, you're awake," the man said upon seeing Naruto. "And your wounds have healed too, though that is to be expected." Naruto didn't reply, but kept wary eyes on the stranger as said man kept speaking. "You should probably eat before we go. We wouldn't want you to collapse from hunger after just waking up." Naruto's stomach growled again upon the mentioning of food. But Naruto still kept his eyes on the man. "Go," Naruto repeated. "Go where?" "There are some people that want to see Naruto," the man replied as he walked back outside the room. "Don't take too long though, okay, otherwise you won't be able to meet them." And with that he left the room, closing the door behind him. When he was alone again, Naruto stared at the door and then at the food, repeating this several times over. Finally he decided that he might as well eat something. Naruto grabbed some of the food and began to eat. A few minutes later, after devouring the entire tray of food, Naruto got out of the bed, put on his sandals that were stacked against the bed and headed towards the door. When he opened the door, Naruto peeked his head out and saw that the hooded man was waiting for him. Upon seeing the blonde, the stranger said, "Okay then, follow me." The two were soon walking down a dark and seemingly endless hallway. Naruto still felt unsure about all of this, but realizing that, in the chance that this was a trap, he had a better chance of escaping than remaining in the room. Even now his head was thinking of multiple ways to escape the stranger despite being outmatched in size and probably skills, along with the fact he was unarmed too. His thoughts were cut off when Naruto spotted a light at the end of the hall, and appeared to be getting closer and closer to them. Finally they breached the wall of light, momentarily blinding Naruto. When it passed, Naruto found himself alone, the stranger gone, in another room. This time, however, the room was larger and wider and had several lights on, allowing Naruto to see most of the room. "So you're Naruto-kun?" a new voice asked. Naruto looked around, trying to find the source of the voice. It wasn't until he noticed 2 rows of lights turning on did Naruto stop moving. The lights revealed a long red rug before the blonde heading off towards the end of the room. At the end Naruto could faintly make out at what appeared to be a throne or something, with a person sitting in it. "Welcome, Naruto-kun," the man said. "My child born from the swirling tides." Konoha 16 years later, Hokage's office. Minato sighed as he read some documents from the civilian council that needs signing. They were all about opening up a new mall within the village, under their jurisdiction. That would require funding from the money that was to be used for the academy and orphanage. So of course Minato denied this, and simply had his shadow clones deal with the rest of the papers from said council. "Thank Kami that I finally found a way to beat paperwork," Minato thought to himself as he began reading reports from missions, border patrols or from Jiraiya's spy network. The last one was especially important because even after 16 years, the Toad Sage was still trying to find some clue of where Naruto went or find some trace of Danzo's new hideout. "Danzo," Minato said with a bitter face, as if the name was poison itself. He still remembers what they discovered when interrogating Mizuki and several other shinobi who were working with him. Apparently Mizuki was acting as a link between Orochimaru, one of Konoha's greatest traitors, and Danzo. Not only that, but Mizuki and the 2 dead Chunin were also ordered by Danzo to retrieve Naruto if he ever tried to make a run from the village. Along with the fact that Danzo still had Root active and was even doing unapproved missions, it was enough to bring the wrath of the entire village onto the Warhawk once they managed to locate all of his bases. The results was that Danzo and what few followers that survived fled from the village. No doubt the Warhawk had been prepared if something like this happened. All that remained after the raids were the bodies of dead Roots, in human experiments, classified files, and 100 or so orphan children taken from other small towns in the Fire Country, or other countries. Many of the children were very weak and mentally scarred from the training Danzo put them through. It took about 2 years until most of them could have normal lives. The only one who was still functional, though with a few issues that had to be worked on, was a boy named Sai. But what enraged Minato, Kushina, Tsunade, and even the Uchiha clan more, were certain files that Danzo had. Apparently Danzo was the one responsible for Shursui's death, having stolen one of the Uchiha prodigy's Sharingan in order to use said Ai's special technique, the ultimate genjutsu, Kodo Amatsukami. Danzo later on used Itachi as a scapegoat to put the blame on said boy for Shusoi's death. And if that wasn't bad enough, Danzo's personal lab contained dozens of Sharingans looted from dead Uchiha, and further notes showed that Danzo had Orochimaru infused both said Ai's in the DNA of the Shodaime Hokage within the Warhawk so that he could not only use Shusoi's genjutsu once a day rather than once a decade, but also have spare Sharingan to use the forbidden technique Izanagi. And speaking of genjutsu, Minato read in one of Danzo's journal of how he would actively use Shusoi's eye to try and manipulate the Yondaime, and his wife to hand him Naruto so he could mold the boy into a weapon. However, their strong wills made it difficult, so he merely used other plans by revealing the child's inability to suppress the Kyuubi's chakra while suggesting that he could help the boy control the fox's chakra. Naturally, this enraged both parents before Kushina began to cry out what they had done and what they should have done, which now cost them one of their children. So now, with so much evidence against him, Danzo was labeled a S-rank missing nin for doing inhuman experiments, associating with another traitor of the village, plotting against the Hokage and authorizing missions that could have caused Konoha a lot of problems. To add salt to the wound, there was still the organization that Jiraiya had discovered a year after Naruto ran away. Akatsuki, as they were called, were a group of S-rank missing nin that were apparently hunting the Bijou. In fact, two of its members were Orochimaru and Itachi Uchiha, with the latter defecting while the other decided to remain in order act as a spy within the organization. Despite the fact that Konoha no longer had a Bijou, it was clear that this organization could cause many problems for every village, even those who didn't have a Bijou. So Minato decided that once more information was gathered about them, he would send out warning to the other villages about this so they could be careful. Minato's thoughts later on went back to his remaining child Mito, who had changed drastically after Naruto ran away. Even before that event, Mito had always cared for her brother and never acted like a spoiled brat from the attention she got from her parents and everyone else. In fact, she began to build a name for herself as the second coming of Red Death, also known as the Red Storm, especially when she dealt with those who insulted her brother. Also, she was assigned as an apprentice to Jiraiya, to Kushina's disapproval, as well as to Tsunade, who had returned to Konoha after accepting Minato's offer of starting a medical ninja program. The other kids in Mito's graduating class were also becoming famous in their own right, many of them jonins or tokubetsu jonins. Two of the outstanding ones were Hinata Hyuga and Sasuke Uchiha. Sasuke, whose desire to find his brother and make Danzo pay for framing Itachi and discrediting his deceased kin, along with becoming a strong shinobi, a promise he made with Naruto during their childhood rivalry, and as a way to honor his late rival, was placed into the bingo books at the age of 15 after he single-handedly defeated the former Iwa nin bomber Deidara, who was a member of Akatsuki, and the former Sunanin Sasori of the Red Sand, another member of the organization, when Sasuke and his team were sent to rescue the Godame Kazekage, Gaara, the Jinchuriki of the Ichibi. How the Jinchuriki became the Kage of his own village was thanks to Kushina. Gaara's village, Suna, had made an alliance with Oto, led by Orochimaru, to invade during the Mito's first Chunin exam 4 years after Naruto ran away, in attempt to destroy Konoha. The results were that Orochimaru was heavily wounded, the Yondaime Kazekage was murdered by said snake, both invading villages were low on manpower, and Gaara was calmed down by Mito and Kushina's special chakra, the latter later on adjusting the seal on the boy to contain his Bijou. This act, and later on with Kushina's consoling, a former Jinchuriki herself, changed Gaara into a new person for the better. Back to Sasuke. Apparently news of Deidara's death was leaked out to Iwa and a bounty was placed onto the young Uchiha's head, marking him as an S-rank ninja. Sasuke's reputation only grew when he gained the Mangekyo Sharingan when his older brother died at the hands of Kisame Hashigaki, another member of Akatsuki. Itachi, in his final moments, requested that his eyes be transplanted to Sasuke to his younger brother could gain the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, so that Sasuke could protect both the clan and the village. He was especially known for his use in the Amaterasu, one of the 3 techniques of the Mangekyo Sharingan, earning him the name Konoha Kien, Konoha's Demon Flames. In fact, on the subject of Akatsuki, the only remaining members from Jiraiya's reports were Kisame, their scout and spy Zetsu, and the Shadow Leader, a man who goes by the name of Madara Uchiha, the same man that released the Kyuubi 25 years ago. Next was Hinata Hyuga, who was now head of the Hyuga clan. Hinata had been greatly affected by Naruto's disappearance, so much that she held a great grudge towards the Yondaime's family since she knew that they always ignored Naruto for Mito. Since that day she strengthened her resolve to change her clan's way, something she had promised Naruto when they were little, with her shyness and stuttering slowly fading away. The first show of her hard work was shown during the Chunin exams when she defeated her old cousin Niji, a prodigy, during their match. As time went by she slowly achieved the status of one of the most powerful kunoichis that Konoha had ever produced, along with those like Tsunade, Kushina and Mikoto. When she turned 18 she challenged her father, Heiichi Hyuga, for leadership of the clan, due to her constant refusals of marrying. Heiichi accepted of course, thinking that despite her daughter's new skills, would be no match for him. The match went by quickly, with Hinata overpowering Heiichi with techniques she herself created, much to the shock of the other Hyuga members except for Hitomi, Hinata's mother, who had watched Hinata trained over the past few years. and as promised Hinata became the new clan leader, and her first decision was to have the caged bird seal removed and unite the two branches of the clan. Of course this caused uproars from the elders and the more old-fashioned members of the clan, but Hinata shut them down by reminding them that as clan head, she was in her full rights to make that decision and that the elders were only there to advise her, not command her. Currently she was listed an A to S rank ninja in the bingo books as Konoha's deadly maiden. She still held contempt towards Minato and his family, but she kept it in when during meetings or missions. Minato's thoughts were cut off when he stopped at a report from Jiraiya about some recent events in Witaki. Reports of raids by unknown people in various places within the small nation. Each raid was like a step closer towards Takigakure, and it was up to the point that nothing has been heard from the nation or the shinobi village. Though it was more noticeable in Takigakure, there have been smaller raids in Earth Country and Lightning Country, both of them rivals with Fire Country, with less contact from the Earth Country and almost no signs of Iwanins outside the country. Kumo and most likely Iwa were pointing accusing fingers towards Fire Country and Konoha, claiming them to be responsible for these raids despite similar reports were happening within the Fire Country. But of course Iwa and Kumo were probably just trying to find an excuse to attack Konoha. Minato knew that unless they could find out who was behind this, then another great shinobi war would begin, and it was a good chance that Konoha would be on the losing side. Especially with Inoki, the sandaime Tsukage, who couldn't let go of the fact that Minato had slaughtered at least over 100 Iwanins during the Third Shinobi World War. Minato had actually sent a squad of ANBU under Tenzo to keep an eye on the border between nations in case Iwanins decided to try anything. Near the border of Earth and Fire Country, Jiraiya, the Toad Sage, one of the three Sannin and the sensei of Minato Namikaze, was heading towards the border between Earth and Fire Country. Minato had sent a messenger toad to him saying that he had a squad of ANBU near said border to keep an eye if anything happens. Jiraiya had decided to check out what was going on in Earth Country and figured he would see if the squad had any information. However, while jumping midway, a scent caught Jiraiya's attention that made his eyes widened. It was a smell he was long familiar with, having been through many fights and surviving 2 shinobi world wars, the smell of blood and decaying bodies. It was also coming from where the ANBU squad was supposed to be. Shit, Jiraiya cursed to himself as he took off as fast as lightning, hoping that he wasn't too late. However, once he landed in a clearing he saw that he was too late. Lying before him were dozens of Konoha ANBU bodies, all of them covered with bruises, slashes, blood with their armor and weapons shattered and broken. Some of them were so beaten down that they were almost unrecognizable. What the hell happened here? Jiraiya wondered as he examined the corpses, trying to find some clue as to who did all this. It couldn't have been Iwanins. There would have been tons of earth lifted due to their Doton jutsus, and these people were Konoha ANBU. You would need more force to take them down, but here it appeared like the ANBU didn't have a chance whatsoever. Jiraiya's musings were cut off when he heard a twig snap from behind. Spinning around, Jiraiya got into a fighting stance. "Who's there?" the Toad Sage demanded. The figures soon walked out of the shadows and into light, making themselves visible to the Toad Sage. Jiraiya recognized the person because he murmured with a dark tone, "You." Back in Konoha, Hokage's mansion. In his office while reading some more reports, Minato felt a slight but uncomfortable breeze hit him in the back, causing him to turn around to look at the office's windows. But said windows, the same ones that overlooked the village, were all close. His instincts suddenly went up, causing him to spin around and to find him facing 7 cloaked and masked people. Their cloaks were all black with a hood covering their heads and their masks were shaped like red spirals. "Who are you?" Minato asked as his body tensed, his hands moving underneath his desk, one to grab his special kunai and the other to activate a seal to alert his ANBU. "Don't bother," one of the masked guests said, the one at the front to be more precise. "You will find that your ANBU bodyguards are unavailable." Minato just glared at them as his other hand finally found his kunai. However, the man continued to speak. "I must say though that it was unwise to allow your entire ANBU protection squad to guard outside the mansion, leaving you with no security except for the warning and Hiruzen seals that you placed inside the office." "Don't worry," Minato said as he got up slowly. "I've been in worst case scenarios and still come out on top," the Yondaime Hokage said with confidence. But on the inside he was still wondering if he should try to take these guys on or escape. He had no idea what they were capable of or how they got past the security seals. Add to the fact that they outnumbered him didn't help either. The masked visitor cocked his head to the side, as if he didn't understand Minato's words. Finally the intruder replied, "I see those are quite bold and arrogant words, and they will be your last, Minato Namikaze." He said the last part with a darker voice. "And here is the proof to my claim." Suddenly the window behind Minato shattered, an object flying by the Yondaime Hokage and crashed on the other side of the office. It was so fast that Minato only now realized what it was. "Tenzo," the Yondaime exclaimed as he saw the cat mask wearing ANBU that he had sent to the borders leaning against the wall with a large crater and blood smeared on the wall behind him. The ANBU had several cracks on his armor and mask along with multiple injuries on his person, including a hand-size hole on his chest. He fought valiantly. The same masked intruder said while looking at the down ANBU. Even when he was the last one standing while the others were long dead, he did not relent until the last of his strength was gone. He is a worthy shinobi and should be commended for his bravery. Then he looked back at Minato. He is also an example of that. Despite all your efforts, every plan you can create, all the skills you utilize, your very confidence shall crumble before the greater might, our might. Because this is a declaration of war, for in 7 days, Konoha followed by the rest of the shinobi world, shall be destroyed by the Takyagari. When he finished, the masked invader realized that Minato was no longer standing behind his desk. Turning their heads, the masked people saw that Minato was kneeling beside Tenzo, lying him down on the ground. Ah, as the stories say, you move like a yellow flash, Minato Namikaze, the intruder said. He got no reply from the Hokage, save for a deadly glare from Minato that have made lesser men drop to their knees. The intruders, however, seemed unfazed by it as the lead one replied, that look, it means you understand the full weight of our words and also you want to know who we are as well. But you of all people should know that we're not going to tell, even though it's right in front of your eyes. Farewell, Minato Namikaze, Yandame Hokage, the intruder said just as he and the other masked intruders began to disappear into thin air, not allowing these people to get away. Wait! Minato yelled as he charged at them with a Rasengan already in his hand, but by the time he reached where they once stood they were gone, leaving Minato alone with just himself and Tenzo. Suddenly the door slammed open with several jonins led by Hiruzen running into the room. Minato! What happened? We all saw something flying into Tenzo, Hiruzen exclaimed in shock as he noticed the wounded ANBU. Calming his thoughts, Minato turned around and looked at the assembled shinobi. Hiruzen-sama, I'll explain later. Right now we need to send word to all teams out of the village to come back immediately. Also contact Jiraiya too, wait, a voice said. Everyone looked at its source and was surprised to see that Tenzo had taken off his mask, revealing his bloody and bruised face. His eyes were white as if he was just barely hanging on to life. Yandame-sama, I need to tell you. Don't speak, Minato said urgently as some jonins tried to help Tenzo but was interrupted immediately by the near-death ANBU. No, Hokage-sama, my Mokutan, they were. But before he could finish, his body went limp and his eyes closed. He lost conscious, Yandame-sama, we need to get him to the hospital, a jonin said. Then do so, Minato yelled, earning quick nods from two jonins who soon shunned away with the seriously wounded ANBU. The rest of you send word to the clan heads of an emergency meeting. No exception and no lateness, go now. The Yandame ordered to the remaining jonins. Sir. They all replied and shunned as well, leaving only Minato and Hiruzen, the former looking outside the destroyed window, a grim look on his face. Minato, what in the world just happened? Hiruzen asked as he looked at his successor. Minato was quiet for a few seconds before looking back out at the village. War has been declared on us, Hiruzen, and I'm not sure if we can win this one. Unknown location. In a dark, barely lit room, the 7 masked people from Konoha reappeared out of thin air. The one who was speaking to Minato took off his mask and pulled down his hood, revealing his face. He was a young man, perhaps around his 20s, and had fair skin. He wore a black knee-length trench coat and black pants with red trims on them and dark blue sandals. The man's hair was a smooth red that went down his back and his purple eyes were dark, as he looked at a throne at the end of the room. We have returned, Your Majesty, the man said, bowing towards the throne, followed by the others. Some lights came on, pointing towards the throne, which was made from bright white stone, yet no design at all, on top of a set of stairs and a man sitting on it. The man appeared to be in his late 30s to early 40s. He had long dark red hair that went down his back, along with a thin red beard that connected with his mustache. His skin was tan color, and had red eyes. The man wore a long black cloak that draped over his shoulders and were held together by a large golden button on the left side of his chest. Underneath his cape he wore double-breast black thigh-length trench coat, with matching black trousers and black sandals that went up to the top of his lower legs. On his coat and trousers were dark golden trims. Welcome home, my loyal men, the one dubbed as His Majesty said in a deep voice. I assume everything went well, Shingon. The man known as Shingon raised his head as he looked at the sitting man. Yes, sire, we've delivered the message to Minato Namikaze as well as having deal with the ANBU sent to watch the borders between Earth and Fire Country. Though I must ask, sir, was it really necessary? The older man merely walked off his throne and down the stairs. Waving his hand, he dismissed the others except for Shingon. Konoha has become arrogant over the years, Shingon. People with arrogance do not understand their own weakness through words alone. They need physical evidence in order to see the truth of their vulnerability. Shingon thought about that before accepting the truth of his leader's words. Very well, Your Majesty. Forgive me for questioning your intentions, Shingon said while bowing. There is no need to apologize, Shingon. I know that you disapprove of killing unless it served a purpose, and you merely wish to ease your mind, the leader said, and then he began to walk towards his throne before pausing. Also, while you're here, go and tell the captain of the Kyoshiko in Earth Country to round up some ninjas from IWA, soul seals placed on them too. We're going to need the fodder when we begin invading Fire Country in order to cut off aid for Konoha. Are you sure that is wise, Your Majesty? Shingon asked as he watched his leader sit back down. You do know there are still some escapees, including Inoki's son and granddaughter. It doesn't matter, the leader replied as he tapped the left armrest. Suddenly a screen appeared in midair, revealing the ruins of a village, with stones and smoke all over the place. Iwabikure and the rest of Earth Country already belong to us," he said with an evil smile on his face. "Very well, sire," Shingon said, and then bowed before Shen away. Once he had left, the leader made a wave of his hand, and suddenly a man, wearing a tight black trench coat, pants and a cap on his head appeared, kneeling by the leader's side. "Contact my son. Tell him that I need him to return here for a new assignment, as well as his partner," the leader said. "Yes, sire," the messenger replied and disappeared, leaving the leader alone to his thoughts. With Jiraiya, Jiraiya had just said before he had to jump back in order to avoid a hail of shuriken. The toad sage landed on a tree branch and looked back down at his attacker. Said person was a man, and despite the fact that he wore a blank black mask and a hood over his head, Jiraiya could tell that he was a young man, maybe in his 20s. He wore a black trench coat and matching black pants and sandals with red trims on the coat and pants. He also had a hood on his ankle-length cloak that blew in the breeze as he stood before the toad sage. On the back of the cloak was a red swirl. "Who are you?" Jiraiya asked as he watched what this person would do next. The attacker said nothing, except for disappearing and then reappearing right before the toad sage. "He's fast," Jiraiya thought as he managed to dodge a kick from the person by doing a backwards flip. As he landed, he shot fireballs from his mouth towards his opponent. The masked man then revealed a round red swirl crest attached to a wristband on his right hand. The crest then flashed, revealing a katana with a silver blade and a round golden guard and red handle. Once the sword was in his hand, the masked man cut through the fireballs and charged towards Jiraiya. This time the toad sage was ready as he formed some hand signs, ninja art, wild lion mane jutsu, and soon the Sanin's long white hair moved and morphed in the head of a lion, charging towards the masked man. Jiraiya watched as his attack was just inches away from the masked man, only to widen his eyes in shock as his attacker swatted his attack like it was a mere fly. "How?" Jiraiya thought as he just barely dodged a sword thrust by the masked attacker. The toad sage then delivered a powerful kick to the man's chest, only for that to be deflected as well, this time by some invisible force. "What is this, some kind of armor?" was the thought on Jiraiya's mind before he was punched in the face hard by his opponent, crashing through the trees until he made contact with the ground. With the Sannin temporarily stunned, the masked man lunged again at Jiraiya, sword raised to deliver the killing blow. Jiraiya had just gotten back up when he saw his opponent coming towards him. He quickly began forming hand signs, but the opponent was faster. "She's not going to make it," and true enough, the sword pierced Jiraiya's chest just as the toad sage was on the last hand sign. But instead of dying, Jiraiya poofed into smoke, surprising the masked man, but before he could think, a shadow appeared above him. He looked up and saw Jiraiya raise his hands to his mouth. "Katon, Great Dragon Fire Jutsu!" Jiraiya shouted and fired a large fireball in the shape of a Chinese dragon's head towards his opponent. The masked man didn't have enough time to counter as the attack soon consumed him, the area he was in, into one giant bonfire. Jiraiya landed on a nearby tree branch and looked down at the fire that was slowly turning into smoke. A few seconds later, his keen eyes caught onto a figure jumping out of the smoke, revealing itself to be the masked man, though now his coat was burned off on the left side, revealing his toned and tanned chest and left arm. The masked man was about to do something when suddenly a hand grabbed the masked man's right arm. Both the toad sage and the masked man, though it was hard to tell with the mask, were both surprised by the sudden arrival of a third man. The third man wore the same attire that the masked man had worn, except without the mask, and had a hood covering his face. "Enough," the man said without releasing his grip. "Our orders are to return to the palace, not engage the enemy. Is that understood?" The masked man did not reply, all he did was relax his arm. The hooded man then released his grip before looking down at a shocked and confused Jiraiya. "Be grateful, Jiraiya. You get to live for a little bit longer, and then fall with the rest of Konoha." And with that they left in the blink of an eye, leaving a worried-looking toad sage. Konoha Council Room, Day 1. Minato waited until all the clan heads, including Shikaku, the head of the Nara clan, and the ANBU commander, Minato's predecessor Hiruzen Sarutobi, and his former teammates, Hamura Mitokado and Koharu Yuditane, arrived and were seated. "I thank you all for coming at such an unexpected time," Minato said as he sat down, and then activated the privacy seals that were set up around the room. That's when the Yondaime Hokage spoke. "The reason I summoned you all here was because war has been declared on us." This surprised all of the clan heads, shocked that war had been declared on them right out of the blue. Finally it was Shikaku who asked, "I'm assuming that this has to do with the explosion from your office earlier today?" Minato nodded in response. "Yes, a few hours ago, 7 masked people entered my office through unknown means and apparently killed my ANBU that I had stationed outside the mansion, along with the team of ANBU I had sent to the borders between Fire Country and Earth Country, since the thing that crashed through my office was Tenzo." "Wait, Tenzo?" some asked. "You mean the same one that had the Shodame-sama's cells implanted into him?" "The very same," Minato said before continuing with his story. "After that they declared war on us, calling themselves the Takyagari, and that they would invade us in 7 days. When he finished, Minato noticed that Koharu and Hamura stiffened a little at the name before silently conversing with each other. Whether or not anyone caught on to this was unknown as Fugaku soon spoke up. "Why the hell would they tell us when they would invade?" Fugaku asked. It would make more sense for them just to launch a surprise attack while we're unprepared than telling us the day of the attack, which would allow us to be ready for such a time. You have a good point, Fugaku-sen, Shikaka said, gaining everyone's attention. However, perhaps it was their intention to tell us when they would attack. War isn't just about numbers or surprise, it's also about strategy. In this case, they use psychological warfare on us. What do you mean, Shikaku? Choza asked his old friend. You believe that they won't attack us? It's not about if they will attack us but when they will attack us. The Nara explained. I believe they told us the number of days it would be when they would attack in order to make us panic. How do we know if they will truly attack us in 7 days? The attack could be in 5 days or about a month. They aren't trying to warn us of the attack, they are trying to make us confused and worry so that way we'll be less prepared for it. We should try and find where their base is. Hinata suggested. That way we can stop from any invasion from happening. We still don't know if they will attack us. Koharu commented. For all we know, this could be a bluff just to have us waste resources in order to weaken us. No, Minato said gravely. They fully meant what they said. And if they were intending to assassinate someone, then they wouldn't have to make a sudden appearance in my office. The fact that they were able to infiltrate Konoha, get into my office along with killing a dozen of A and B shows that this is a serious matter, one we should deal with immediately. There were several nods in agreement to this before Shibi spoke. Did Tenzo-san learn anything about these mysterious attackers? Many of the clan heads and the 2 elders noticed the sad looks on Minato and Hiruzen's faces. Tenzo only managed to tell us that they did something with his Mokutan just before succumbing to his wounds. This made everyone minus the current and retired Hokages gasp, while a few just widened their eyes in shock. Tenzo-san is dead? Inoichi murmured, still unable to believe that someone as strong as Tenzo was killed. Minato nodded his head. Yes, he died a few minutes before reaching the hospital. The Yondaime said sadly, but then he got serious, a sign to the others that this wasn't the time to mourn. But now we must stay focused. I've already sent word to all shinobi out of the village to return immediately. I've even sent word to the fire daimyo to inform him of what has transpired. Also, as Shikaka-san said before, we do not know if the enemy truly intends to attack in 7 days, and informing the populace of this might cause unnecessary panic. As such, I want all of you to inform only Jonin level shinobi of your clans, while other non-clan shinobi of Jonin level shall be told as well. Tokubetsu Jonins and Chunins will only be told that guard duty shall be tripled and should remain tight-lipped of this. Understood? Everyone nodded, and after a few more things were discussed, Minato ended the meeting. Being one of the last to go, Hiruzen was just getting up when for a brief second he felt a sting of pain on the right side of his chest. This did not go unnoticed by Minato, who was just walking past his predecessor when this happened. Hiruzen-sama, is everything okay? Minato asked worriedly. At first the former Hokage didn't respond to Minato, instead rubbed the fabric where the pain came from with his hand. He knew that the only thing there was a scar from a deadly fight long ago. But the fact that it briefly stung him was odd after all these years, but brushed it aside as a mere coincidence, and got up while replying to Minato's question. It's nothing, Minato, I just moved my body too fast. Guess I should be more careful with this ancient body of mine, Hiruzen said with a low chuckle. Minato just looked at Hiruzen carefully before nodding his head. Then the two left the room, never noticing a large shadowy figure moving along the floor, and then wall towards the ceiling before disappearing. Back at the Takiagari headquarters, I see, the leader said as he looked at the two people before him. They were the same two that had confronted Jiraiya. The masked man still wore his mask, but his hood was down, revealing spiky red hair. Besides him was the other man that looked like he was in his early 30s. His skin was tan, and he had some red fuzz on his chin and red spiky hair with a ponytail going down his back. His eyes were a dark purple that they almost looked black. You did well to avoid further conflict with Jiraiya, Kane. I can't afford having either of you being at anything but full strength when we make our move on Konoha. Kane bowed. Thank you, father. The leader then turned to look at the masked man. And what is your excuse for initiating unnecessary contact with the S-level threat Jiraiya? The leader asked as he looked at the masked man. For a while both men looked at each other, not a single word being said between the two. Then without a word, the masked man turned around and walked away, ignoring the passive look from the leader and the annoyed look from Kane. The leader merely looked at the spot where the masked man once stood. Then a smirk appeared on his face. Such a rebellious attitude. We'll have to keep an eye on him so he doesn't get himself killed by accident, he commented. Kane nodded in agreement with his father as said man got up from his throne and walked behind it. True, but he is improving. I think seeing the Toad Sage made him snap. Other than that, he's doing well, he said before pausing. Then he continued, speaking of watching, I got a report from Takubi on my way here. Really? The leader asked as a window suddenly appeared before him. It showed that it was nighttime where they were with a full moon out. The sounds of water moving in the distance could be heard as well. What did he have to say? Besides the fact that Minato informed the clan heads of our declaration, the two elders were acting suspicious when our empire was brought up. Takubi wasn't able to get close enough to hear them, but it probably will put them at odds with the Hokage. Kane reported. I see, the leader said as he still looked up at the moon. I expect that whatever they were discussing about will put them at odds with Hiruzen. But in the end, just like in the past, Hiruzen will forgive them, especially if it might give them a fighting chance. the leader said with a chuckle. Kane was silent for a moment as he looked at his father, while said man looked up at the moon. Finally Kane broke the silence. Father, what do we do about Obito Uchiha and Orochimaru? Their presence could still hinder us deeply, especially if Obito makes a move against Nagato in aim. Orochimaru is of no concern to us. We can eliminate him whenever we want to, the leader said. However, Obito will be a bother if left unchecked, so we'll have our spies keep an eye out. For now our focus is on Konoha, so have everyone be ready when the time comes. Now leave me. Understood, Father, Kane said with a bow and left the room. Once he left the room he was standing in a plain white and blue hallway with pillars on both sides of the hallway. He had just made a turn to the right when a voice from behind said, "Yo, so what's up with the boss right now?" Kane turned around and found himself looking at a man who was about the same size as Kane. He had short, spiky, red hair that was shaved on the sides a bit with a ponytail behind going down to his shoulders. His skin was a bit tan, and he had 3 scars over his left eye. He wore the same type of outfit that Kane wore, with the black, ankle-length cloak being held together by a red swirl crest where Kane had his. Underneath it the man wore a zipped, black, long-sleeve leather jacket and baggy pants with knee-length guards over them. However, what was the most noticeable feature was that he had a wide, vicious grin on his face. "Jikyoku, what are you doing here?" Kane asked the Kurokishi, the name for the Takiagari's elite fighters. Jikyoku merely chuckled as he walked up to Kane while looking at the door to the Emperor's room. "Relax, will ya, Kane-san, can't a guy just walk wherever he wants to?" Kane narrowed his eyes at the man, not liking how Jikyoku was acting. "Your orders, Jikyoku, were to assist with hunting down the remnants of Iwa's forces. His Majesty does not wish to have rebels threatening us," Kane said, calling his father by his title whenever he's in public. Yeah, I know, but I got bored with killing those weak-ass pussies, so I decided to come back to see if there was anything more interesting to do," Jikyoku responded as he prepared to enter the Emperor's room. But he was soon stopped when he and even Kane felt a powerful wave of chakra coming from said room. The force was powerful enough to crack the numerous areas on the walls. After a few seconds it stopped, and everything was back to normal. Jikyoku just stared at the door for a moment before backing away. "TCH, guess he's not in a visiting mood," he said before walking away. "Oh well, guess I'll ask him later," the tall man said, "probably for the best," Kane said as he looked at Jikyoku and then at the door. "After all, today is that day. He always wants to be alone then," Kane finished. Jikyoku said nothing but just walked off, doing a quick wave goodbye. Kane, however, stared at the walls as the seals appeared and began repairing on the walls. Then he continued walking down the hallway, mumbling to himself. Might as well see what the Gaki is doing right now. Hopefully he isn't getting himself killed. Back inside the throne room, the leader was still looking up at the moon, an emotionless look on his face. He didn't make a single movement except when he looked down below, which revealed to be a body of water that seemed to go on forever. Then he closed his eyes as an image of a woman with long red hair, wearing a dark blue kimono, came into his mind, her back facing him. Soon he thought as he continued to stare at the night sky, and a salty sea scent reached his nose, earning a small smile from him. Konoha Namake's estate. Kushina Uzumaki Namake's was busy preparing for dinner when her family came home. Her eyes were a bit dull and lacked life in it, which had happened much whenever she prepared dinner or some other kind of family gathering. The reason was that it always reminded her of the fact that one of her children, her son Naruto, was no longer living with them, and it was all her fault, despite what her friends said. It wasn't easy for the past few years to pull through from her depression, but she did so for her daughter's sake and the sake of her husband and friends. Still, the pain that she was the reason for her son's running away still lingered deeply within her heart. She had just finished turning off the heat for her homemade ramen when she heard a crash in the living room. "Minato-kun? Mito-chan? Is that you?" Kushina asked as she thought that one of the 2 people mentioned came home and accidentally knocked something over. However, that proved not to be as she got no response. Curious, Kushina slowly walked into the living room, carefully looking for any signs of an intruder. But she saw no one, only a frame upside down on the floor, probably what had made that noise. Moving carefully, Kushina walked towards the frame, and once she was near it she bent down to pick it up. The redhead then turned the frame right side up and looked at the picture in it. The picture had 4 people in it. They were all redheads, 2 were female and the last 2 were males. One of the females was taller and older than the other, her red hair tied into a ponytail, a sweet smile and light purple eyes on her light skin. The younger female had a rounder face, light skin like the older female, purple eyes and long red hair that went down to her back. She wore a purple and yellow kimono and had a wide smile on her face. The male next to her was also young but looked a year or 2 older. He had tan skin, a small smile, purple eyes and spiky red hair with a small ponytail behind his head. He wore a dark blue kimono with green stripes. The last person, the second male, was also older than the first male and was standing besides the older female. He had long red hair that went down towards the middle of his back. It was dark just like his purple eyes and he had tan skin. He had a small smile and wore a black kimono with red stripes. Kushina gazed at the picture for a little bit longer, memories of years ago coming back. Finally she snapped out of her daze and put the frame back where it was on the shelf. Takiagari base. The leader was silent for a few minutes, contemplating his next move. It was the 4th day of the declaration, and not much had been happening surprisingly. However, already word had spread that Konoha was gearing up for a war or something, and many villages were doing a wait-and-see approach. Well, besides IWA of course, but that was obvious. Speaking of which, there have been several attempts from Iwa's allies Kumo to infiltrate the Earth country to find out what's going on. The results were the teams being slaughtered, something the leader knew would not sit well with the Yondaime Raikage. But that man would be taken care of in due time, for now Takiagari's focus was on Konoha. He pressed a button on his throne's armrest. Have we heard anything from Baizo yet? The leader asked. Sir. Baizo-san has reported that he and the first Kyoshiko have so far encountered no serious threats besides the usual wandering groups of bandits. They did however have a swift confrontation with a team of Chunin a few hours ago, but the details were not important, so Baizo-san decided not to report it, the voice on the other side said. However, he reported an hour ago that they have detected several high chakra signatures, most of them low Jonin level, with one high Jonin level heading towards Konoha from Ricefield country, and are currently 5 miles away from them. They await orders. I see. In that case, tell him I give permission for them to check it out. If Baizo believes they are a threat, then he may do as he pleases. However, he should report anything worth mentioning, the leader said as he got up, ignoring the yes sire from the other side as the leader suddenly phased out of the room, and then reappeared in a different room. Actually, it was more of a small wasteland that appeared to be a center of an apocalypse. Rocks were uplifted, craters were everywhere, large and deep ones too. Powerful and wild cyclones were in sight, blowing around the multiple large bonfires that were all over the place, as well as creating violent waves from the vast man-made ocean nearby. The sky was covered in dark clouds that fired multiple lightning bolts that struck the ground with fierce power. Father? A familiar voice said. The leader looked to his right and saw sitting on a rock was Kane, his cape off of his uniform, and was now sitting on it. The man too was looking out towards the destruction being caused. Said destruction was created by another person, a younger man that was currently putting his shirt and jacket back on. He had spiky red hair, and from what could be seen of his face, he had tan skin too. You have improved, Naruto-kun, the leader said to the young man as he approached him. And Kane, I see no reason why you wish to continue training since you've already become so powerful. Naruto looked at his grandfather before putting his cloak back on. Until I see no more enemies that are a threat, I will never cease training, he replied. The leader nodded at that, an appropriate response for someone with the life they had. A good response, Naruto-kun. You have shown the will as a child of the swirling tide better than anyone in our clan. When the time comes, I expect great things from you, my boy, the leader said as Naruto bowed and walked away. He's advancing at a faster rate than we anticipated, Kane said to his father once Naruto was out of hearing range. The leader looked at him. He is? So you believe that he might be finished before the 7 days prediction? He asked. Kane shrugged. Possible. In fact, I give him by tomorrow to be done completely and reach the final stage. Kane paused as he looked at his father, though that doesn't mean he'll be able to control it right away. He's not like father, and then there is Kurama or Kyubi that's within him. The leader nodded, remembering about the fox as well as his own father, Kane's grandfather. Indeed, but they are similar in personality-wise though, he said before getting back up. For now we'll proceed as we originally schedule and only act if we're given an opening. And with that the leader walked away, followed by Kane. Konoha, Day 4. For the next few hours in the afternoon, several teams of Konohanins could be seen passing through the gates of the village, due to receiving orders from the Hokage to return due to the village being put under martial law for the upcoming invasion. Of course, only Jonin-level ninjas as well as ANBU and clan heads were informed about the last part. This was because the Hokage didn't want to cause unnecessary panic amongst the population, though they did make an announcement that evacuation drills would be starting tomorrow. Elsewhere, 2 people could be seen walking towards a famous restaurant called the Hot Flames. These 2 were the heirs of 2 of Konoha's clans, Shikamaru Nara and Choji Akimichi. The former had a bored and lazy look on his face while his friend was munching on a bag of chips. This is so troublesome, I can't believe we have to deal with all this crap, mumbled Shikamaru while his friend chuckled. Both of them had become Jonins, with Shikamaru preparing to take his father's place as the village's Jonin commander. As such, both of them had been informed by their fathers along with the rest of the high-ranking members of their clans. Currently they were going to the restaurant to meet up with some of their friends, all of them Jonins or part of ANBU. A few minutes later they entered the establishment, which was full with people, both civilians and shinobi alike. The 2 friends made a turn to the left where there was a large table with several people already sitting there. Said people were their third teammate, Ino Yamanaka, along with Kiba Inuzuka, Sakura Haruno, Niji Hyuga, Tenten Higurashi Hyuga. She got the surname Hyuga after marrying Niji, Shino Abirame, Rock Lee, and Hinata Hyuga. You're late, Ino shouted to her 2 teammates, as they made their way over towards the others. A tick mark formed on her head when either of the boys looked apologetic. Pipe down, you troublesome woman, Shikamaru said as he sat down next to the window, followed by Choji. Dad needed me for some things concerning the upcoming invasion, the Nara explained as he recalled of how his father and the Hokage were busy discussing the information that Jiraiya, who returned to the village yesterday, revealed about the Earth country being taken over by the Takiagari. Ino just rolled her eyes before going back to her menu. However, Lee suddenly spoke up. Is it wise to order now? We are still missing some of our youthful comrades, Lee commented. Sasuke-kun was on a recon mission near Rice Country with his ANBU team. He'll probably be back by tomorrow, Sakura said in response, remembering how her husband had left a few days ago. Sai-kun was sent on recon patrol around the Fire Country for signs of a large force. Ino informed the others about her husband's current status. Troublesome, Shikamaru muttered as he looked out the window, staring at the clouds. Choji was going for another chip when he noticed someone else was missing. Hey, where's Mito-san? The Akimichi asked. Last time I saw her was when I was delivering some reports to the Hokage. Hinata answered. She and Kushina-sama were heading out to set up barrier seals around the village's walls in order to increase our defenses. Hokage-sama isn't taking any chances, is he? Kiba commented, followed by a bark from his canine companion Akamaru. Can you blame him? Shikamaru responded. We're talking about a group of people who managed not only to kill a team of ANBU but also enter the Hokage's office undetected, he said before pausing as he took a drink of water. Furthermore, we have no idea what the enemy is truly capable of or the number of their forces. For all we know, we might be dealing with a force larger than an entire nation or a force the size of a small village. Either way, we'll find out for sure in 3 days probably. The others just nodded solemnly as they began discussing about other topics. Shino just sat by and listened, not really taking part in any more of the conversation. However, something did grab his attention. Outside the window, Shino caught a glimpse in the sky. A messenger bird? Shino asked himself as he watched a black bird flying into the village. And if you were to look closely, you could see that strapped to the bird was scroll carrier, which was used for many messenger birds. The messenger bird that Shino had spotted continued its descent towards Konoha, heading towards the older but more lavish part of town. As it flew closer towards the district, it was suddenly pounced by an unseen figure, and the two landed on a nearby roof. The bird was busy making noise and flapping its wings to escape, but from a few soothing hums and a reassuring pat from the figure, the bird calmed down. This allowed Mito Uzumaki Namikaze to safely undo the seal on the bag and then pulled out the scroll. Sorry about that, Mito said to the bird and then let it go. The girl had grown a lot in the past few years since her brother left. She was almost an exact replica of her mother, except her red hair went down to her neck and was tied into a ponytail. She wore a fishnet underneath a purple shirt that hugged her curves. Under that was a short-sleeve red jacket with blue lines and a hood. Mito also had short black pants that were hidden by a red skirt, both going down to her knees. Her forehead protector was wrapped around her head and strapped to her back was a katana, slightly covering the Uzumaki clan symbol on the back of her jacket. She and her mother had just finished laying down the last few barrier seals on the village's wall before returning back towards the Hokage mansion. That was when she spotted the bird overhead. Getting curious, she followed after it while her mother continued towards their original destination. Watching the bird fly back to wherever it was going, Mito looked down at the scroll she now had. I just wanted to see what you were carrying, Mito murmured as she opened the scroll. She slowly opened it, and the first thing she saw was a certain name, which caused her eyes to widen in shock. This is shit I need to inform Dad, Mito said as she dashed towards the Hokage mansion. Back in the office of said man, Minato, along with Kushina and Jiraiya, were busy discussing something. So we still have no idea who these people are, what they're capable of, or even where their base is? Kushina asked. Jiraiya nodded his head. I've contacted every source I have and still couldn't figure out a damn thing. All I know is that they managed to invade Earth Country, taking both it and Iwagakure over unnoticed. Apparently we're able to do something to Tenzo's Mokutan, as well as capable of using incredible teleportation jutsu, and getting past security seals of high caliber such as yours, Minato, Jiraiya said. Also, some of the other nations and villages are beginning to set their eyes on us since we've been gathering all our forces back to the village. Unless these guys make a move or something, then another village will. And we have enough problems as it is with Orochimaru too, Minato added. We can't count that snake of missing a chance like this to strike at us. I just hope that, Dad, Mito cried as she barged through the office, startling the three adults already inside. Dad, you got to read this, the young redhead said as she walked up to her father's desk. Mito-chan, what is it? What happened? Kushina asked her daughter as said girl handed Minato the scroll. You know that messenger bird I spotted when we were coming back here? Mito asked her mother. When Kushina nodded, Mito continued. Anyway, I found out that the scroll was for those two old bag of bones, Hamaru and Koharu. But the person it's from is what you need to look at. Whatever else was going to be said was cut off by a loud slam. Jiraiya, Kushina and Mito all turned to see Minato towering over his desk, both fists on said furniture. Lying underneath him was a now wide-open scroll, and if one were to look at the man's face they could see a look of shock and anger on the Yandame's face. Bastards, the young Hokage murmured. Minato-kun? Kushina said, trying to find out why her husband was so upset. Minato didn't respond to her but instead looked up at Jiraiya, a serious look on his face. Jiraiya-sensei, can you take a team of ANBU and head towards the homes of Hamura and Koharu? Seeing the seriousness on his former student's face, the Toad Sage nodded. Sure, kind, be glad to do it, but what's the occasion? Jiraiya asked. Minato just glared back down at the scroll before replying. The reason is because those two are now guilty of communicating with an S-rank criminal and threatening the village's security. In two separate areas within the Fire Country, a few miles away from the borders of Rice Field Country, a group of 20 people wearing black uniforms, which consisted of trench coats, pants, fingerless gloves, hoods over their heads, black masks, and all of them wearing a one-shoulder strap pack could be seen on top of an edge. On the masks was the kanji for Sikh except for one man, who was at the front and standing exactly over the edge. He wore a similar outfit as the others but with several different features. His coat did not have a hood but instead a small black cape that went down to his waist. His gloves had the finger parts, and his red hair was shaved around the sides of his head leaving only the top with hair. He also wore a black hat with a peak and round spectacles. Finally he had a red belt with a buckle that looked like a dragon. He was currently looking through a pair of binoculars. Through them he could see a small team of Konoha ANBU jumping through the trees back to the village. Well, it appears that we've found the source of those large chakra, the man said as he handed the binoculars to one of his men. Identify any who are of importance. The man said. Sir, the subordinate said. Then he pulled out a rectangular object from his pocket and clicked on it. This caused the object to light up as well as the binoculars. Soon the images of the 7 ANBU down below appeared and began running a scan of the ANBU. Finally it stopped at one, causing the subordinate to look up at his superior. Baizo-san, the ANBU with the crow's mask, and their captain, is Sasuke Uchiha, one of the S-level threats. Baizo pushed his glasses up. I see, interesting turn of events this is. Then he looked at the Kayashuku team. Well, our orders were to eliminate them anyway but inform His Majesty of this piece of news as we make, or descent. And with that he jumped off the edge towards the forest below, followed by the rest of the Kayashuku. Elsewhere, south of Konoha, a group of people could be seen walking through the forest of Fire Country instead of taking the dirt-filled road a mile or so away from them. Many of them appeared to be in their late teens or 30s, though it was hard to tell since they all wore blank white masks. Some wore white or black cloaks over their bodies while others had different outfits on but with a tanto strapped to their backs. However, there was one person that stood out from all of them. In the center of the group was a person that wore an entire gray cloak that covered his body and face. The person was apparently old as his visible left hand was carrying a cane he was using to walk. The man paused for a moment before looking up at the clear sky, with the clouds floating up ahead. But for a moment the man thought he saw some kind of ripple in the sky before it quickly disappeared. Is everything okay, Danzo-sama? A young man with short black hair, wearing a mask with goggles, asked. Danzo stared up at the sky for a second longer before looking back forward and continued walking. It's nothing, Torian, let's continue towards Konoha. Back at the Takiagari base, the leader was once more silently sitting on his throne, an empty look on his face as he sat in silence. Standing round his throne were several aides that weren't the least bit disturbed by their master's silence. Suddenly a voice could be heard without the room. A message from Baizo-san to His Majesty. The voice said. Baizo-san and the first Kayashuku have reported that they've identified the large source of chakra as a team of Konoha ANBU. Furthermore, it has been confirmed that one of the ANBU is the S-level threat Sasuke Uchiha. The moment that the voice finished that sentence, a sinister smile slowly made its way onto the leader's face. Then he quickly got up, startling his aides a little. I guess it's time to get going. The leader said. Sire? An aide asked. To where? The leader gave the man a brief glance, causing the aide to flinch a little. But the leader made his way down his throne while speaking. To where? Why, to Konoha, of course. With Naruto-kun's training nearly complete before the original time schedule, and Sasuke Uchiha outside the village, this is a good chance to invade Konoha. Kane, sire, said man replied as he suddenly appeared before the leader. Notify the Kurokushi and have them prepare for immediate transport to Konoha. I want preparations made for today or tomorrow, no exceptions. The leader said. Kane bowed. Understood, sire, but what about Naruto and I? The leader smirked. You two shall come with me. I plan on heading to the village an hour before the others. The leader replied before continuing walking. The Takiagari will now invade Konoha. Konoha, Interrogation and Torture Department, Day 5 morning. The former teammates of Hiruzen Sarutobi, Koharu and Hamaru, were both sitting in an empty room with stoic looks on their faces. They knew that there were ANBU outside the room guarding it, and preventing any attempts of escape. It was only a matter of time that they would be caught, and they accepted that fact with open arms. They lived long lives and had nothing to regret. The door soon opened, and coming through were Minato Namikaze, Hiruzen Sarutobi, 3 ANBU and Konoha's 2 top interrogators, Inoichi Yamanaka and Ibiki Marino. The 2 elders couldn't help but flinch as the Hokage's menacing glare looked down at them, as if trying to swallow their very souls. It was one of the reasons why Minato Namikaze was so feared by his enemies. Not just his techniques, but when his eyes took on a lifeless yet terrifying dark blue orbs, as if the enemy was being swallowed into an endless dark pit. He certainly did deserve the title of Hokage. Once one of the ANBU closed the door, several seals were activated, making sure no one came in or out. Then Minato sat down opposite of the 2 elders while Ibiki pulled out a file. We've already searched your homes and found numerous evidence of you two communicating with the S-rank criminal Danzo Shimura for a period of time. in which you shared with him important information such as our current shinobi strength, relations with other villages and nations, and finally the current situation between us and the force known as Takyagari, along with more topics dating back during the later years of the Sandaime Hokage's rule. As Ibiki read off the two elders' crimes to the village, Hiruzen couldn't help but feel ashamed at his former teammates. He remembered back when he first took the mantle of Hokage after the death of his sensei, the Nidaime Hokage. He made Hamura and Koharu his advisors, his time with them as a team convincing him that he could trust the two to help him guide Konoha. However, he soon realized that their views were different from his, where he disapproved of using his own ninjas as weapons or doing things against human nature. His former teammates were more militaristic like Danzo, which may have been the reason why they sided with him a lot. However, to hear all of this, how they constantly did actions behind his back and even now were dealing with the now S-rank criminal, Hiruzen had trouble even looking at them. After Ibiki finished reading his report, Minato turned to look at the two elders, who still had their stoic faces on, clearly not withering under the numerous accusations. Despite all this, I'm willing to give you two the benefit of the doubt if you explain why you're still in contact with Danzo. Without even talking amongst each other of who should speak, Hamaru went first. While we admit that we had no idea of the experiments that Danzo had done, or his dealings with Orochimaru, we knew that Danzo's loyalty was to Konoha first above all. He and Root did many things that the village couldn't have done publicly, but it was all for protecting the village. In fact, I have no doubt that Danzo would face the Shinigami himself if necessary. Koharu took it from there. Even when forced out of Konoha, Danzo still made sure the village was safe, which was one of the reasons why we were still in contact, and given the current situation we felt that it was important to tell him everything that we learned since the enemy's attack a few days ago. She paused before adding, which is also why we wanted to keep his return a secret until it felt like it would be good to inform you, Yondaime-sama. Minato and the others didn't seem surprised by the part of Danzo coming to Konoha. The letter that Mito had intercepted was to inform the elders of which direction Danzo would approach Konoha from. Minato sighed as he rose from his chair. While I admit that your reasons were noble, it does not change the fact that you two were and even now going behind the Hokage's back for so long, as well as withholding information of a S-rank criminal's location. For that you will be retained within a secure facility until this crisis has passed before being judged of your crimes. And with that, Minato and company left the room while the ANBU escorted the two elders towards the facility. As the Yondaime Hokage and company were leaving IT facility, an ANBU suddenly appeared, kneeling before his leader. Hokage-sama, we've just received a report from the southern part of Konoha's gate that Danzo and a large group of his root force has been spotted. That made Minato and the others gasp at the news. I didn't expect Danzo to arrive here so soon. Minato thought to himself. But there's no way that he would just show himself, knowing what will happen due to him being an S-rank criminal. So does that mean? Minato looked back at the ANBU. Have the guards made any attempt to apprehend Danzo? No, Hokage-sama. Actually, this was reported by a passing-by Jonin when he went to check on the patrol team, only to find out that the entire patrol team was taken hostage by Danzo's root. The ANBU reported. What? Minato yelled, but quieted down as the ANBU continued speaking. One of the hostages was given back to deliver a message that Danzo only wishes to speak with you and Sandaime-sama. The ANBU then revealed a scroll. This scroll was in the returned hostage's hand. We believe it's from Danzo, and most likely his demands. With Sasuke's ANBU team somewhere else in Fire Country, Crow, aka Sasuke Uchiha, was jumping through the trees of his home nation with his 6-man ANBU team behind him. His team had been posted near the borders of Rice Country to see if they could find out any information of Orochimaru's latest actions. However, they had been recalled back to Konoha due to the news of a possible invasion approaching the village. So now we find Sasuke's team heading back to the village at full speed. Sasuke did a quick turnaround to make sure his team was present before facing the front again. That's when the Uchiha noticed that up ahead a flock of birds could be seen flying from some trees nearby into the sky. Strange, Sasuke thought to himself. Could something have startled them or something? Is something wrong, Captain? One of the ANBU asked Sasuke. Sasuke was silent for a few seconds before replying. No, it's nothing, let's keep moving to. But Sasuke's sentence was cut short when he felt a large killing intent nearby, and suddenly there was a scream from behind. Sasuke stopped in his tracks and turned around to see two of his men being pierced by two white beams as they were sent down towards the ground below. What the hell? One of the 5 remaining ANBU, who wore a wolf mask, cried before someone appeared right in front of him, one of the Kayashiku to be precise. The man pulled out a katana from a crest on his right wrist and swung it at the ANBU, who managed to deflect it with his ninjato. But then the Kayashiku slammed his left hand into the ANBU's chest and murmured, Amitan, Red Bolt Shock, and suddenly a red ball of energy literally tore through the ANBU's chest, killing him instantly. Sasuke and the 3 remaining ANBU watched as their third comrade was killed right before them. That's when Sasuke heard something whizzing past the trees, several noises. All of you get down! Sasuke shouted as he jumped towards the remaining ANBU just as several projectiles struck them and caused a massive explosion. A minute later the large plume of smoke was surrounded by the rest of the first Kayashiku and Baizo as they watched the smoke, with the latter having a pleased look on his face. Well, I have to admit I was kind of disappointing of how fast the ANBU were killed, but the goal was completed. Baizo commented. However, that was cut short when several large purple arrows appeared out of the smoke, towards the first Kayashiku, impaling several members while the others managed to dodge. Baizo-san, look out! A Kayashiku member shouted as a purple arrow flew straight towards the Iryu. But instead of jumping out of the way, Baizo raised his left hand and with a strong swing, he smacked the arrow to the side, causing the arrow to impale into a nearby tree. There were also barely any marks on Baizo's arm. His glasses dropped a little, showing his dark purple eyes. It seems like I spoke too soon, he said as the smoke finally disappeared, revealing Sasuke's purple complete Susanoo, covering him and the 3 other NBU. Looking up, Sasuke now had the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan activated, glaring at Baizo. Looks like I made the young man angry. He had just said that when Sasuke launched a larger arrow at him. This prompted Baizo to go for a rest hanging on his belt. When he touched it, a saber appeared in Baizo's right hand, with said weapon cutting through the arrow. Then Baizo brought his sword up to block an attack by Sasuke, who had deactivated his Susanoo and appeared right before Baizo, his Chikuto drawn. Baizo-san! One of his men yelled as he saw the Uchiha engaging the Iryu. Without even looking at them, Baizo said, perhaps worrying about me, you should deal with those remaining ANBU that escaped. The Kayashiku members that survived Sasuke's surprise attack turned and saw that the 3 ANBU had indeed escaped during the confusion. Without a word more, they headed off in pursuit of them. I admit it's admirable of you to act as a decoy to buy your men time to escape, Baizo said as he pushed Sasuke back, making the Uchiha land on a nearby branch. Sasuke merely raised his weapon and took a fighting stance. As a captain, it's my job to make sure that my men are safe. I have no doubts that they can hold their own against your men. You, however, I can tell, are trouble that I can only deal with. Baizo smirked as he raised his own weapon and took his cape off. I see, you take the position very highly. But my orders were to make sure that you die. Your men are of no concern to me, just you. Konoha, Hokage Mansion, Council Room. The room was entirely empty, save for a small number of people. On one side were Minato Namikaze, who sat in a chair, with Hiruzen Sarutobi and Jiraiya standing on both sides of him. Across from them was a half-cloaked Danzo Shimura, who, like Minato, was sitting in a chair, with 2 root agents standing beside him. As agreed to your demands, Danzo, he said the name with venom. We each brought 2 people with us to act as bodyguards in this room. Said room is now covered in privacy seals and chakra nullifying seals. Only someone, the person who placed them, can deactivate them, and said person is outside right now with the door covered by a lock seal that only I can undo. And the rest of my men? Danzo asked emotionlessly as if he didn't care. It was Hiruzen who answered this time. They're being watched by several teams of ANBU and Jonins at one of our training fields with a barrier around the area. And as we promised, no harm shall come to them unless provoked. Danzo nodded before replying, I see despite the negative emotions you and everyone else are radiating towards me, Minato, you can keep yourself in check. Though I'm sure the current crisis has helped in that bit. Minato frowned at that and his hand twitched a little. I would like to see you try and say that to Kushina-chan, the Hokage said, remembering how furious Kushina was when she not only learned that the elders were still communicating with Danzo, but when she saw said man, she nearly went QB on the old man and had to be held down by multiple shinobi. If you had given me the boy the moment that you found out he could not control it, then I wouldn't have to prey on yours and Kushina's fears. Danzo replied. Noticing the somewhat confused looks on the 3 Konohanins' faces, Danzo elaborated. Shusoi's eye as he paused before continuing, or had the ability to manipulate a person's thoughts without them realizing it. But there are certain cases, where if a person's will is strong enough to resist, then the eye won't work, so you have to focus on something that is already there. What's that supposed to mean? Minato asked, despite the unpleasant feeling inside of him along with the rage increasing too. Simply put, I had to focus on a feeling or thought you were having and give it a push in my favor. He kept going despite the killing intent radiating off of Minato now. In other words, deep down inside of you was a bit of fear that one day the Kyuubi would break out of Naruto, or your own son would go on a rampage. His sentence was cut off when Minato was in front of him with one of his signature kunai in his hand, with the blade touching Danzo's throat. The rest of the occupants didn't stand idly by. Hiruzen had his hands on both Minato and Danzo, trying to stop any unnecessary bloodshed, while Jiraiya had taken a fighting stance in front of the 2 rude agents. Danzo still had his emotionless face while Minato's was one of utter rage. Minato, now is not the time for this, Hiruzen said to the young Hokage. We must remain focused on the current task at hand. Think about the village, and what would happen if a fight were to happen right now. Minato's eyes were still on Danzo, though his body relaxed at hearing Hiruzen's words of reason. Slowly he moved back from Danzo, lowering his kunai and returned to his chair, followed by Jiraiya and Hiruzen. The Sandaime Hokage looked at Danzo, his eyes steely gaze at his former rival. Now I think it might be better if we get back to the topic at hand, the Takiagari. Of course, Danzo said as he began removing the rest of his cloak that covered his right side. What the 2 Hokages and Sannin saw shocked them. Instead of the transplanted arm of the Shodaime cells along with the multiple Sharingan that they had read in the reports, was instead a metal arm that ended at the shoulder. As the rest of the cloak came off, it revealed that Danzo's right side of his face was heavily scarred and the right eye was now covered by an eye patch. The Warhawk noticed their reactions and merely said, what you see is the result of gaining the information we managed to acquire. he said as he tossed the folder towards Minato, and that is the amount of info we have on Takiagari. Minato raised an eyebrow as he inspected the folder, which only had about 24 or so papers within it. This is all you managed to get? I thought there would be more seeing how it's you. A small frown formed on Danzo's face at the subtle jab but kept his composure. Then you can see how well hidden they are. All we know so far is that their forces are quite large, about the same size as a hidden village or maybe even greater. But the most important fact is that the entire force are in fact members of the Uzumaki clan. That caused Minato, Hiruzen and Jiraiya to look at Danzo in complete and utter shock. Uzumaki clan? Minato asked, unable to believe that his wife's clan was alive, their enemy and according to Danzo were the size of a hidden village. That can't be possible, Hiruzen murmured. Even if there were survivors after the destruction of Uzushio, there's no way that they could have gotten back together during the chaos, let alone gain such numbers as you claim. Danzo sent a hard look at Hiruzen. You shouldn't sound so surprised, Hiruzen. After all, it's your fault Konoha and all the elemental nations are in this predicament. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Jiraiya roared, feeling the need to defend his sensei. The only reason why we weren't able to aid Uzushio during the Second War was because Kusa, AIM and Kiri were blocking our forces while IWA and Kumo moved to attack Uzushio. There was no way we could even expect so many villages to align together to take down one village, let alone push through them in time to aid Uzushio. I'm not talking about that, Danzo said, breaking Jiraiya's rant. I'm referring to something else and Hiruzen knows what it is. The Warhawk said as he looked directly at the former Hokage. When word reached our ears that Uzushio was destroyed and survivors of the Uzumaki clan were reported to have escaped and headed towards Fire Country, I had given you counsel about it to find them and bring them to Konoha. Hiruzen nodded, remembering that time. Yes, but they were so spread out from the destruction of their village, and we were still recovering from pushing through the force that held us off, that there was nothing we could do. The Sandaime Hokage replied, and it's because of that does Konoha face destruction, along with what happened 3 weeks later. Danzo added, 3 weeks later? Minato asked, what happened 3 weeks later? Hiruzen along with myself and a detachment of shinobi ran into a group of survivors. But instead of welcoming us, they attacked us, nearly wiping us out until we managed to defeat them and force them back. Danzo said. It was then that Hiruzen's eyes widened at what his former comrade was referring to. Jiraiya and Minato noticed that the Sandaime Hokage had a dark and faraway look in his eyes. You realize it now, don't you, Hiruzen? Danzo commented. That this is no one else's fault but your own because 51 years ago you failed to kill that one man. Takiagari base. An order to all Kurokishi. A voice announced as people's silhouettes could be seen walking through the hallways. An order by His Majesty. All Airi are to report to the Gate of the Void for immediate departure. Word has been received that S-level threat Sasuke Uchiha is engaged with our army. As such, His Majesty has declared that the Takiagari will now invade Konoha. Up on a balcony, overlooking a large gate, the leader could be seen with Kane behind him. A sinister smile was on the leader's face as he watched the gate glow brightly, consuming the two and the other people gathered. Before the light fully consumed them, he said, it's time for the children of the swirling tide to rise once more. Konoha, northern gate entrance. Standing on the walls that surrounded the village of Konoha, two chunins were looking out towards the forest of the Fire Nation. Both shinobi appeared young, around their early 20s, as they had relaxed and bored looks on their faces. However, one of them frowned when he saw a reflection in the sky, something that his partner caught. What is it? The chunin asked. The second chunin chewed his teeth before answering, well, it's been bothering me, but I swear now and then I see some kind of invisible wall a few miles off from the village. The man said, you don't have to worry about that. A third voice said. Both chunins turned around and saw another shinobi, a jonin to be exact. That's a barrier that was set up by Kushina-sama, Mito-sama and several others of our village's seal experts. The barrier is designed to deflect attacks and deny unwanted people or foreign chakra signatures from entering the village. If that fails, then the second defense will kick in. What's the second defense? The first chunin asked. The second defense is the original barrier set up around the village during its founding. The jonin explained. Like the first barrier, it strengthens the wall from attacks and the barrier team can sense if an intruder enters the village. The jonin finished. Cool. The second chunin exclaimed, hearing how well the village's defenses was. So that means we'll be prepared when the enemy comes and won't have to worry about being taken unprepared. The jonin nodded. Yeah, this definitely shows that Konoha is not a village to be messed with. With seals and barriers like those, it's impossible for the enemy to surprise us. I see, a fourth unknown voice replied. The two chunins and one jonin looked up and were shocked to see the Takiagari leader floating above them in the air. That sounds like quite the defense if the enemy didn't have a way to penetrate it. He said the last part mockingly. What the? The jonin shouted in shock as he and the two chunins backed away from the floating man. How the hell did he get past the barriers? His question remained unanswered as he and the others were consumed by a large explosion, followed by a massive flash of light, with many more following after it all over the village. The leader turned around to look at the Hokage monument. War sure is rough, he said to himself as large pillars of blue light began to appear all around the village, followed by the screams of shock and panic. Shinobi, both on and off duty, were rushing off to grab their gear while clan members were heading towards their respective compounds for orders about the current situation. Those with civilian families were trying to lead their loved ones towards the emergency shelter. Many of the shinobi were heading towards the Pillars of Light. Back with Minato, who had returned to his office in the Hokage mansion after his meeting with Danzo, looked up in shock at the pillars. "What is this?" Minato murmured to himself. "They look like pillars of blue fire," Jiraiya commented. "No," Hiruzen replied, getting looks from the other two. "They're pillars of dense chakra. It must be how they penetrated barriers so easily." Suddenly 5 ANBU appeared in the office, kneeling before the Hokage. "Hokage-sama!" one of the ANBU yelled. "I know!" Minato shouted. "Send out orders. I want all Genin-level shinobi to take the civilians to the emergency shelter. Find Tsunade, tell her she's in charge of the hospital and to organize the mednines immediately. Have all Chunin and higher shinobi to head towards the pillars and prepare for battle. Also I want Shikaku Nara to take command of the eastern part of Konoha. I'll take command of the western part. This may be Konoha's most important battle ever. Hi Hokage-sama!" The ANBU all cried as they shunned Shin out of the office to relay the orders. Minato then turned to face Jiraiya. "Jiraiya-sensei, I have feeling there are going to be some enemies that will stick out from the others. You think you can handle them?" The Toad Sannin smirked at his former student before heading off. "Who do you think you're talking to, kid? I'm the great Jiraiya-sama. There's nothing I can't handle. I'm going to," Minato. Hiruzen said, already removing his cloak, revealing his ninja outfit. "If the person lead the invasion is who I think it is, then I'm the only one who can deal with him," the former Hokage said with a tone that left no room for doubt. Hiruzen Minato said as his predecessor took off towards the village. The Yondaime Hokage sighed to himself, and two vanished in a yellow flash. Namake's estate. "Mom!" Mito cried as she ran towards her parents' room after seeing the pillars of chakra appearing all over the village. She already had her katana strapped to her back and her gear all set and ready to go. "I'm here!" Kushina's voice replied. Mito looked up and saw her mother walking out of the living room in her jonin outfit and half of her red hair tied in a ponytail. Strapped to her back were two ninjato and a wristband on her left wrist with the uzumaki crest hanging from. "Mom, did you see what's happening?" Mito asked as she followed her mother out the door. "Of course I did," Kushina replied as she and her daughter stepped out of the door. Then she activated the house's defense seals. "Let's get going before it's too late," and with that they took off. To be able to break through that S-level barrier, Mito and I designed, Kushina thought to herself. There are only a few people I know who can do such a thing, and they're supposed to be dead. Southeastern section of Konoha. Gathering around one of the pillars were Genma, Rado, Izumo and Kotetsu along with a dozen more shinobi between the ranks of Chunin and Jonin were standing in front one of the pillars. "Zaji, anything yet?" Genma asked. The Chunin known as Zaji closed his eyes for a moment, but when he opened them he frowned. "Sorry, still nothing. This pillar of light or chakra is disrupting my sensing abilities." Genma cursed quietly and turned back to the pillar. "Alright, we have no idea what might be inside there, so be ready for anything." Everyone replied with a yes or a nod. Zaji closed his eyes again and concentrated on the pillar, trying to find somebody within it. Finally he sensed something, a chakra different from the pillar. And it was silver too. "I got something!" he shouted to the others. "It's definitely a different chakra source and massive too, like high Jonin level." Genma nodded as he turned to face the pillar. At first there was nothing, but then an image began to take shape inside the pillar. At first it was blurry, but as it became clearer Genma realized that it was a person, the enemy. "I see him, attack!" he shouted as he and the other shinobi prepared to charge. But before they could take a step, a large beam of white energy was shot out of the pillar and struck Genma. It literally blew away his right arm and a small part of his chest. Coughing up blood, Genma lost consciousness and collapsed on the ground. A shinobi screamed, clearly he was inexperienced. Jigenma-san was. Rado cursed to himself as he looked back at the pillar, his black katana in hand. "Shit! Be ready, you guys," he ordered as he raised his sword. "Right." Izumo and Kotetsu both cried as they lifted their kunai blades up, ready for anything except for being grabbed in the face and slammed towards the ground hard, making them lose conscious. The man also happened to get past Rado, who tried to move around and attack. But the man was too fast and slashed Rado across the chest. This caused Rado to collapse to the ground as well, shocking the other remaining shinobi. The attacker, who wore the Kurokashi cloak along with a waist-length coat and pants that were black and red trims along with black sandals and black gloves, stood up before the other Konoha shinobi. As the hooded man prepared to take off his hood, Zaji cried with a small hint of fear, "Get him!" And in a frantic attempt he and the remaining shinobi charged. "Sorry," the man said as he pulled his hood off, revealing his tan skin, red mohawk and purple eyes. "1. The order is to kill you all." And with that he charged. While in other parts of the village similar events were happening, the invaders attacking multiple Konoha shinobi and taking them down with relative ease. Elsewhere in the Uchiha compound, Shingon had just stepped out of his pillar, hood covering his face, and looked at the assembled shinobi before him. They appeared to be mostly Chunin, newly promoted with 2 or 3 Jonins. One of them was Inabi Uchiha, one of the clan's skilled kenjutsu users. Still, Shingon remained unfazed. "Cower in fear, Konoha." the Uzumaki said as the pillar began to fade away. The Kurokushi have come to purge you. 2. Inabi glared at the redhead's statement. Don't act like you're above us, intruder. If you think you can just appear in our compound and try and take us all on, then you're clearly underestimating the Uchiha clan, he said as he gripped his sword, trying to hide the fact his arms were shaking. His Sharingan activated, and Nabi could see Shingen's chakra, and they were quite large. It's about as large as Fugaku-sama and Sasuke-san's, and those two have the largest amount of chakra in the clan. Inabi thought to himself, if that's true, then why are you shaking? Shingon asked as he walked towards them, causing some of the younger members to take a step back subconsciously. You speak as if you were ready for this, like this is all some kind of game, instead of a life and death situation. Such a foolish thinking. The war has already begun, you bastard! Inabi shouted as he charged, followed by Tekka and Yashiro, all three of them intending on killing. But before either of them can even get close to Shingon, the sound of the wind snapping was heard, and soon all three Uchiha fell to the ground. Blood coming out of large cuts on their bodies, was Shingon standing in the middle of the three fallen Uchiha. Apparently you're not prepared for war, Shingon said as he looked at the remaining and now scared remaining Uchiha members. In another part of the village, a mile or two where Genma's group were, Asuma Sarutobi was looking down at the bodies of several Shinba before him, a blank expression on his face. Then, upon hearing an explosion nearby, caused Asuma to turn towards its source, his face turning into one of concern. That's where Genma and others are, he thought to himself when a presence in front of him appeared, making him tense. Before him, on the other side of the row of bodies, was another of the invaders. It was a man, about few inches taller than the Sarutobi, with tan skin and curly red hair that was combed to look like small spikes. He also wore black visors with red trims on too, similar to his attire. Said attire was a black and red striped jumpsuit with small sleeves that matched his baggy pants and the Kurokushi cloak over it. 3. You okay? The invader asked jokingly. That look on your face makes me think that someone died over there. Is that the case? Asuma spit out his cigarette and looked back at the Uzumaki. Not really, I doubt that those guys were killed so easily, the Sarutobi replied. The spiked hair Uzumaki smirked, showing that he had black braces on his teeth. Betcha they are. That's where Zessen is, and if they ain't dead then that means he screwed up, which is bad since he'll get one hell of a scolding back home, he said. The son of the third Hokage frowned as he dug his hands into his pockets. Doesn't really sound like you have much faith in your comrades. That's a bad sign of how this is going to turn out for you. The invader cocked his head to the side and scratched it with his left hand, which now suddenly had rings on each finger. What's that supposed to mean? You saying you're going to kick my ass? Asuma looked down for a second as he pulled out his trench knives, wind chakra already flowing through them. Then he raised his head and glared at his opponent. Let's see, you guys declared war on us, invade the village and are killing our friends and loved ones. At the last part his killing intent rose, startling the Uzumaki for a moment. You don't honestly think I'm just going to let that all go, do you? Asuma asked with a darkened tone. The invader stared at Asuma for a moment before smiling again, this time wider and menacing, his killing intent rising. Well then, Igorogoro Uzumaki, we'll take you up on that, arrogant bastard. Within the market district, a girl no more than 19 years old let out a battle cry as she was dashing past Konoha nins, easily cutting them apart with a dao in her hand. She wore a female version of the Kurokushi outfit, a black-red striped thigh-length trench coat with a miniskirt and a cap on her head, with her long red hair underneath it while flowing with the breeze along with her cloak while wearing knee-high sandals. 4. A Chunin, watching as the girl cut down 2 more ninjas, gulped. What the hell is this kid? She's cutting through us like we were fruit, he yelled as he raised his kunai, though he still seemed scared. Another ninja, this one wielding a katana, replied, don't lose focus. She's just one person. We can still take her down if we work together. Just as he finished that line, said girl was heading towards him, dao in hand and ready to cut again. The ninja didn't realize this until the girl was right upon him, but before she could kill him a blur appeared in between, delivering a swift kick into the girl's stomach. As the girl was pushed back a few feet, she looked up and saw that her attacker was none other than Saminuzuka, with her Niken Kuramaru. Tsum-sama! The 2 shinobi shouted in surprise as said woman was soon joined by her children, Kiba Inuzuka and Hana Inuzuka, along with their Niken, Akamaru and the 3 Himura brothers. After them were several more members of the Inuzuka clan. Kiba blinked upon seeing the person they were facing. A kid? We came all this way just to fight one single brat? He exclaimed in annoyance, with Akamaru barking in agreement. Hana gave a quick glare towards her little brother. Don't get cocky, Kiba. This girl's chakra is large enough to be high jonin level, and the way she managed to kill all these shinobi with ease means she isn't a pushover. Hana commented while her 3 ninkins growled at the girl. Your sister's right, Kiba, Tsum said, catching her children's attention. If she was sent along with the other invaders then we can't take her lightly, despite her appearance. The Inuzuka matriarch stated with Kuramaru barking with her. Said girl just looked at the newly arrivals before smirking and getting in a stance. So I'm fighting against a bunch of mutts? This will be interesting, she said with glee. Near the emergency shelter, things weren't going any better for Konoha's forces and a monster. A ninja shouted. The said monster was another Kurokishi, though his features did indeed give him a menacing appearance. He wore the standard Kurokishi uniform with the entire cloak covering his body while wearing an ankle-length black and red striped trench coat, while also appearing to be floating a little. His red hair was very dark and smooth, going down to his back, and he had pitch black eyes with a mask covering the lower part of his face. 5. Surrounding him, however, were 10 floating thorn-like objects, several of them carrying impaled Konoha, with the ground around him littered with several more. None of our attacks appeared to be working on him. Another ninja exclaimed as he backed up a little, his face covered in sweat. And we can't even touch him without those thorns impaling us. They even kill you right upon contact. A third ninja commented as a certain sound was getting louder. Furthermore, the same shinobi said as the sounds of screams could be heard, why is it that whenever a person dies, they start screaming like that? The question went unanswered as the Iryu slowly approached them, the blank look still on his face as his thorns dropped their recent kill. Shit, this guy is too much for us. We have to get out of here. A shinobi cried as he ran towards the shelter and was slowly followed by the others. Wait, don't run. The last standing ninja said to the others. If we leave this post, then hundreds of villagers will be killed by this man. It's our duty as shinobi to fight to protect them at all costs. Just as he finished that sentence, several small explosions popped up around the Kurokishi, covering him in smoke. The ninjas all looked up to see Sai riding on top one of his ink-made birds. Sai-san, the brave ninja said as the ink user jumped off of his bird and landed on the ground. Sai took a moment to look at the smoke and then back at the survivors. He then gave them a reassuring, real smile. I'm sorry it took me so long to get here. But good work in holding him back so far. I'll take it from here. The ninjas were shocked at Sai's statement. But Sai-san, you can't possibly mean to fight him all on your own? A ninja exclaimed as if the thought was suicide. Sai turned to face the smoke again as it began to clear, the Iryu's silhouette appearing. If you guys want to help, then you can do so by making sure no one reaches the villagers. My job right now is to make sure this person doesn't even get near them, Sai said as he pulled out an ink brush and one of his scrolls. He didn't listen to their responses, as his eyes were totally focused on the Iryu, who had by then fully stepped out of the smoke, with barely any injuries on him. The center of the village. The location was completely deserted, with all the occupants having fled to the emergency shelters when the pillars of light appeared. There wasn't even a single bird or squirrel in the area, just dead silence until Minato Namikaze appeared out of thin air. The man had one of his special kunai in his right hand as his eyes scanned the area, as if trying to find something or someone. As expected, you got here pretty quick, a voice from behind said. Eyes widening for a moment, Minato turned around to find himself facing Kane. The redhead was sitting comfortable on a bench with a bottle of sake in his hand. He had an amused look on his face as he took a chug of sake. I was just about to sit down and take a drink until you got here. By the way, how did you find me so easily? Kane asked as he took the bottle away from his lips. Minato's eyes narrowed as he placed his kunai back into his pouch, all the while looking at Kane. It wasn't hard really. Your chakra is similar to your sister's, though with some slight differences in it. And I knew that you would choose an isolated area for our rematch, so this was the best choice. Kane smirked at that while getting up. Then he sealed the sake bottle into a scroll and put it underneath his cloak. Kushina Nichin married a smart man indeed, Kane said with a small smile before frowning slightly. I'll have to apologize to her after this is over. Funny, Minato said as he took off his cloak, revealing his Konoha Jonin's outfit. Strapped to the back of his flak jacket were 3 scrolls with dual ninjato as well. Then he glared at Kane. I was thinking the same thing. The Battle of Konoha had begun. With Minato and Kane, the two stared at each other for what seemed like forever, either of them moving with only Kane's cloak flowing in the breeze. Finally, after what seemed like forever, Minato made the first move, disappearing in a flash, startling Kane for a second before he spun around and raised his left arm to block a kunai strike from the Yondaime Hokage. When the kunai made contact with Kane's body, it didn't pierce or slash as it was supposed to, but was held in place. Minato's eyes widened at this, but he didn't have any time to wonder as Kane delivered a powerful kick to Minato's stomach, sending the young Hokage flying backwards into some rubble. Kane took a second to look at his arm to see that only a hole in his sleeve was made, but no injury to his body. Good, it looks like he doesn't know about Shintai like I thought. Seems Kushina is still keeping the clan secrets a secret. Kane thought as he dug through his cloak. Guess that means I don't have to worry about him knowing Shinken either. The look on your face is a sign that you weren't expecting that, Kane said with a smirk as he watched Minato get back up. Though I can't tell if it's because your weapon didn't pierce me or that I knew where you would come from. Still, he paused as he pulled out a small crest from his cloak. It glowed for a second before revealing a large double-sided gray broadsword with the uzumaki symbol in the center of the blade. I can't really give you time to figure it out. And then he disappeared and reappeared behind Minato and swung his sword down. When it made contact, a massive explosion was caused, taking out the nearby buildings in the process. Kane looked at the spot where Minato's body was supposed to be. Before the smoke could even disperse, Kane said, "You know, you got to figure out different areas to attack besides the back," he said as he lifted his sword so that he was holding it behind him, blocking Minato's Rasengan. Once again the Yondaime Hokage was shocked. His sword managed to block my Rasengan? How? He thought as he jumped backwards to gain some distance. Your skills with the sword haven't changed, Kane and I-san. Minato said. Kane smirked as he looked at his brother-in-law. Don't call me that, Minato, we're not family. If we were, then I would be less comfortable with killing you. Minato pulled out his dual ninjato and getting into a pose. And what about Kushina-chan and Mito-chan? Are they not family as well? Kane frowned at that question/jab and raised his broadsword with only one hand, momentarily releasing a small fraction of killing intent. Of course they are, even though I never met the latter. However, if they choose to side with Konoha, we will honor that and treat them as enemies. Then a sinister smile appeared on his face. But the person going after them, he isn't the forgiving type. Before Minato could question what he meant by that, Kane gripped his sword with both hands. Then the broadsword began to glow white with Kane saying, Onmeten, Divine Blade Slash, and then swung his blade in a slashing motion, releasing a large and fast white slash of chakra towards Minato. Shit! The yondaime yelled as he raised both his swords, infusing chakra into them. He managed to do so just as the attack made contact, resulting in another large explosion followed by a shockwave, sending nearby objects flying backwards. Up on the Hokage monument. I'm glad I managed to find you, sire. Shingon said as he walked towards edge of the Hokage monument, the massive mountain that looked over Konoha. Carved onto it were the 4 Hokages that ruled and guided Konoha over the years. Sitting on top of the head of Hashirama Senju, the Shodaime Hokage and founder of the village, was the Takyagari leader, or its emperor to be exact. The man was looking down at the village as fighting was going on within it. Without looking at the young man, the emperor said, I was wondering whether you would be looking for me or joining the others in the assault. At least did you kill any of Konoha people? I had a brief skirmish with some members of the Uchiha clan. Shingon replied as he stood next to his leader. Eventually their corpses or wounded forms will be discovered. Eventually? The leader asked in return. You sound as if there would be survivors? Kane-san told me to never expect things to go 100% as planned. Shingon replied, which earned a noticeable smirk on the emperor's face. I was surprised to sense your chakra up here. I would have thought you'd be down in the village, viewing the results directly. I find it more suitable for me to be up here. The leader responded. Then he formed a cold smirk on his face. In fact, I feel it to be ironic. Shingon raised an eyebrow. Ironic, sire? The reason for the Hokages of the past and current to have their faces carved onto this mountain is a way of remembering them, and thus their accomplishments, and service to the village. He paused before continuing. But there is also another reason. To carve their faces on this mountain is a way to show that even in death, they still overlook the village, guiding and protecting it. Then his eyes darkened and his cold smirk grew. And now all they can do is watch helplessly as their beloved village and people are led to ruin with I, the instigator of that ruin, to be sitting with them, seeing what they see. To me that is the irony and is pleasurable. He finished before going back into silence, and continued watching the battle below. Shingon didn't say anything in response to that, just merely joined his leader in watching the view of carnage. After a few minutes of silence, Shingon spoke. I took the liberty of sending 4 Kurokashi to kill Hiruzen Sarutobi. Did you now? The leader asked. And who would those be? I sent Higashi, Chijumu, Shiko and Tenoshi. I have confidence that they can deal with the retired Hokage, so you don't have to dirty your hands with dealing Hiruzen, Shingon replied. The leader smirked a little at the thought of concern and turned his attention back to the village below. Suddenly the leader's eyes perked up before narrowing, something that did not go unnoticed by Shingon. Sire, it seems Naruto-kun has found his prey, was the leader's only reply. With Kushina and Mito, it was thanks to Kushina's trained instincts did she shout out to her daughter, move. And the two got out of the way just as the spot they were in exploded. Kushina landed on a destroyed pillar while Mito landed on a house's roof. Who's there? Kushina shouted as she pulled out a red-bladed katana out of nowhere. Her response was a man standing on top of a roof across from her and Mito. The man wore the same outfit similar to the other invaders. However, a pitch-black mask that only had his red spiky hair showing, nothing else, covered his face. The man was about the same height as Minato, being a few inches taller than both redhead women. Are you one of the invaders? Mito asked as she pulled out her dual katana from the seals on her wrists. The masked man did not reply, merely raised his right hand, revealing a bracelet with the uzumaki symbol hanging from it. Then in a brief flash it disappeared and was replaced with a katana in his hand. The blade was long, completely black with a red and black grip and black round guard. Before either females could get a better look at the blade, the masked man made a swinging motion with the katana. Upon doing so, a bolt of lightning as well as a fire and wind launched from the sword towards Kushina and Mito, who were momentarily shocked by the unexpected attack. However, they managed to come back to their senses and jump out of the attack's way, which instead struck the area where they once stood. The impact was a giant explosion that could probably be seen by half of the village. Realizing that the time for talk was over, Kushina charged towards the masked invader at inhuman speed. When she was close enough, she brought her blade down upon the man, but the masked man calmly reacted by bringing his sword up to block her attack. But while the masked man was focused on Kushina, Mito used that to get behind him, aiming for his legs. However, that plan did not work out as hoped for when the masked man used his left arm to smack Mito's blade aside with ease. What? Mito thought to herself as she and Kushina jumped back, gaining distance from their opponent. She noticed that the man's arm wasn't wounded from coming in contact with Mito's blade. What is his body made out of? Iron? Kushina, however, had separate thoughts. That was Shintai. So they are uzumaki as I thought, were the thoughts within the older woman's head. I guess I'll have to resort to using mine, thought it's been a while since I used it. Just hope I haven't lost it completely. Kushina Uzumaki, a voice said, snapping said woman out of her thoughts. She saw that the masked man was looking at her with his blade raised towards her direction. The weapon looked like a cross between a katana and a longsword, with the blade being single-edged and red too with black markings on it. The crossguard was shaped as a pentacle, with the handle being two-handed with black and red stripes. At the very bottom of the handle was a long red chain that seemed to wrap around the owner's arm. For the crimes against the clan and your family, the head of the Uzumaki clan has ordered that you be judged for your crimes. As such, I shall take upon the duty of exerting your punishment. And finally have revenge for those years of neglect you and the Nato Namikes have done. Naruto thought to himself as he charged towards his mother, sword raised. With Sai. Sai jumped back as he quickly drew several ink birds within his scroll. A few seconds later, said birds flew out of the paper towards Sai's opponent, who just had passive look on his face. The masked Kurokishi merely raised his right hand and pointed forward, with the thorns responding and flying towards the ink birds. When they came in contact, the thorns destroyed the ink birds but were pushed back by the more numerous projectiles Sai created. Once his thorns returned to his side, Nasa, the Kurokishi, saw that Sai wasn't in his original position anymore. But then he felt a presence above him, and so looking up, Nasa saw Sai in midair, just finishing another drawing, which turned out to be a lion. Unable to use his thorns fast enough, Nasa took the attack head-on, the ink lion slamming into Nasa and causing dust to spread out and cover the area due to the impact. Sai landed surveying the area to see if Nasa was going to appear anywhere, since he doubted an attack like that would kill him. But to his surprise, Nasa merely walked out of the dust cloud, completely uninjured except for some dirt on his clothing. Impossible! Sai thought as Nasa's thorns reappeared. Even if it wasn't strong enough to kill him, it should have at least left some wounds. But he looks completely unharmed. Perhaps I should try and attack him faster. But before Sai could do anything else, he noticed a shadow overhead. Looking up, he saw the large form of a person heading straight towards them. It was only thanks to his quick reflexes and survival instincts that Sai managed to jump out of the way before there was buried within the crater formed by the newcomer. As he landed, Sai got a glimpse of him. As he figured, the man had a large, muscular figure and wore a uniform similar to the other invaders. The only difference was that he wore a black wrestling mask over his face with a red swirl on the front with matching thick red markings around the eyes, nose and cheeks. His mouth and chin, along with a red mustache, were the only things not being covered by the mask, which also showed his tan skin. He wore ninja sandals that didn't go up to the knees and were shorter, along with black gloves and a wrestler's belt around his waist. 6. Sai had little time to take in the situation when the newcomer made another charge towards him. Left hand reached out to grab the ink user. In a fast thought-out plan, Sai pulled out his flat-tip tanto to defend himself until a wall of earth rose up between him and his opponent. When said man rammed his hand into the wall stopped his hand, but not before the large man was able to nearly break through it. What the? The man asked in shock as he just noticed the wall of earth before him. Sai was in a similar state of confusion, but was cut off when something ran past him. The next thing he knew, a familiar pink-haired girl rammed her own fist into the wall, effectively smashing it, and revealing the enemy. The enemy, shocked at what just happened, was unprepared when Sakura rammed another fist into his face, sending him flying back a couple of feet. Sakura! What are you doing here? Sai said as he got back up once the large enemy was now buried underneath rubble. The medic Neem turned to face her teammate and smiled. Sorry Sai, but right now it's not a good idea to take these guys alone. She's right, Sai. A familiar though unusually serious voice said behind the two teammates. Sai turned to see Kakashi Hatake walking up to them with his hands out, not in their usual pockets. His posture was also very rigid and stiff, a sign that he wasn't in a lax mood. Kakashi-sensei, Sai said as the silver-haired man walked past him. The sound of feet running caused Sai to look to see that the massive Iryu was back up and charging towards the three Konohanins. Damn it, don't think I'll let you get away with that, you bitch. Yoma yelled towards Sakura. I wouldn't run so recklessly if I were you, Kakashi said casually to Yoma. Before the Uzumaki could understand what he meant, he was suddenly engulfed in a giant explosion from beneath him. What the hell? Yoma cried before a giant crater stood where he once was. I had placed dozens of explosive tags underneath that spot, knowing that you would run over them, Kakashi said to himself and the others before looking at Nasa. If that explosion didn't finish you off, then you'll be trapped down in that pit long enough for us to finish your friend off. Sai and Sakura merely looked at their sensei, never seen Kakashi being so serious before. Don't take your eyes off of the enemy, Sai, Sakura, Kakashi said as he stared at Nasa, who had a passive look on his face, even if he just witnessed one of his comrades get defeated. These people, without warning, invaded our village and began slaughtering shinobi and civilians alike without remorse. We're showing no mercy to these monsters. As Kakashi said this, all over the village, many of the Kurokashi were being confronted by well-known and strong Konoha shinobi, including Asuma Sarutobi, Minato Namikaze, Kushina and Mito, and some Inuzuka and her kids who were facing Gorogoro, Kane, Naruto, though the two girls were unaware of this, and Yuka respectively. Near the western part of the village, Tenten and her ANBU team were facing an invader that wore the standard Kurokashi cloak with his red hair smooth and tied into a ponytail that reached his shoulders. He also had thin eyebrows, tan skin and bags under his eyes. Underneath his Kurokashi cloak he wore a black sleeveless coat that reached down to his waist and was held together at the waist by a red sash with a black swirl at the end. He also wore matching shinobi pants and black sandals. 7. We're not going to forgive you people for what you've done to our village, Tenten said as she pulled out two katana, followed by the rest of her team, pulling out their ninjato. At the industrial section of the village, Shibi Aburame, his son Shino and several of their clansmen intercepted a young man that had long red spiky hair that went halfway down his back. He had tan skin and red eyes and fang teeth. Underneath his cloak he wore black pants with red bands around his ankles and wrists. He also wore blue sandals and a black striped t-shirt that reached down to his waist. Over the shirt were two straps, one going over the other like an X with shoulder pads attached. On his left shoulder pad was a kanji tattoo for Whirlpool. 8. Remember to show no mercy, Shino, Shibi said to his son. Shino nodded. I never intended to. Why? It's because they have done something inexcusable that cannot be forgiven. Approaching the hospital was a young man that was in his early 20s. He wore the Kurokashi cloak over his shoulders, but underneath it was a black red striped jacket on top of a black shirt with a belt. The jacket had a flipped-up collar with fur trims at the top of it. It matched with his black pants and knee-length sandals. His skin was tan and he had designer glasses on too. 9. Standing between him and the hospital was one Tsunade Senju and her assistant Shizen. Don't think that I'll let you get by so easily, Tsunade said as she cracked her knuckles. And don't think I'll forgive you for all the deaths you've caused here. Having arrived near where three of Konoha's famous clans linked, an uzumaki was intercepted by the clan heads Shikaku Nara, Choza Akimichi and Inoichi Yamanaka. His entire body was covered by his Kurokashi cloak and a black mask with red trims that covered his face and head, including the back. The mask had 4 slits, 2 on each side while separated by a peak in the center. The collar was also very high that it was covering the man's neck. 10. You have some nerve to come here, let alone attack our village so violently, Inoichi said, glaring at the man. Don't expect any mercy from us, bastard, Choza said as he pulled out his bow staff and slammed it on the ground hard. It's troublesome, but I'm in a really bad mood to care less about that, Shikaka finally said with a rare angry look in his eyes. At Training Ground 9, Lee and Guy were facing against a very large adversary. The man was about twice the size of a normal man, with a bulky figure too. He had bushy red hair and a beard too that connected with the bangs of his hair, making it look like a chinstrap beard. His trench coat was black with red stripes and reached his calf while his black cloak went down to his ankles. His pants were baggy and had red skulls painted on the knees while he wore ankle-high sandals. Around his coat was a chain-like belt. 11. Yash! Lee, let us show these invaders Konoha's flames of youth, Guy shouted with much enthusiasm. Yes, Guy-sensei, my flames are boiling with youthful power, Lee said with equal energy. Their opponent merely sweat-dropped, wondering why he got stuck with the nut jobs. Back with Kakashi. Kakashi and Nasa were currently in a staring contest with one another while Sakura and Sai stood side by side with their teacher. Sai, do you know what this man's abilities are? Kakashi asked. Only of what I've seen, Sai replied. So far his only means of offense are those 10 floating thorns, and I think that's the limit of how many he can make, Sai said, glancing at said thorns. He can manipulate them at will, thus making close combat impossible. I think they might have some kind of poisoning because when I got here, one of the others said that whoever got pierced died instantly while screaming. Screaming? Sakura asked, shocked and somewhat stricken, unable to believe that anyone should die like that. I've never heard of a poison that could do that. Along with that, he has good reflexes and some kind of defense that makes him impervious to nearly all of my attacks, even against explosive tags. Sai finished. That's all I really found out until you and Sakura-san arrived, sensei. I see, Kakashi said as he stepped forward. That's enough for me to think of a plan to use. Sakura, since you're the medic here as well as more of a close combat fighter, I want you to hang in the rear for support. Sakura nodded. Sai, you use your ink drawings to distract him and make him focus his thorns on those. Sai nodded. I'll try and get in close and go for the kill. We won't know his defenses, but I bet it won't be able to withstand a piercing attack. Wouldn't it be safer to trap him in a genjutsu with your Sharingan, sensei? Sakura asked, knowing that with a genjutsu, the enemy would be immobilized long enough for them to bring in a kill. Normally I would try that, Kakashi said. But in this case it won't work for 2 reasons. This surprised Sakura and Sai. There were 2 reasons why using a Sharingan genjutsu won't work. The first reason is that if he is an uzumaki like the report said, then just as with Kushina-san, genjutsu won't fully work on him because he can just dispel it with a seal or overpower it with his large chakra, Kakashi said as he began to form hand signs. The second reason is because the Sharingan is a Kekkei Genkai. This made confused looks appear on his students' faces. Tenzo, the Anbu that was killed a few days ago when these people declared war on us, mentioned something about his Mokotan before dying. We didn't have an idea of what he meant at first, but seeing who the enemy is, now we know why. Realization dawned on Sakura and Sai, both of their eyes widening. The Uzumaki clan specialized in Fuinjutsu, Sakura said. That means they must have sealed the Anbu's Mokotan somehow, similar to with chakra suppression tags. Exactly, Kakashi said. Though while in some cases this could be a problem, but since there are more skilled shinobi that don't have Kekkei Genkai, it isn't that serious. With the Nara, Akimichi and Yamanaka clan heads, in our case that doesn't hinder us at all. Shikaka Nara said, his genius mind already deciphering the same conclusion that Kakashi came up with. All of our techniques are hidden, which means that we weren't born with them like those with Kekkei Genkai were. That means we can go all out without worry. Choza concluded as he readied his bow staff. Inoichi glared at their opponent, Kizoku. This information has already been sent out to the rest of our forces. You people made a mistake of thinking you could invade so easily. Shibi's group. However, believing that gives us the advantage over you would be illogical. Shibi Aburame said to Hijishiki, because of the high chakra you and your allies are letting off, we won't be holding back. Shino added as his insects began to stir, but his father stopped him before he could act. Father? It would also be illogical to attack him head on all at once. Shibi continued. We still do not know the extent of his abilities to attack on straightforward. I will go in first and determine his moves for the rest of you to see. Shibi said as his insects began pouring out. At Training Ground 9, so I'll attack this unyouthful person first, and you follow my lead once I've roughened him up a bit and discovered his strengths. Guy said as he stepped forward, a serious expression on his face. But Guy-sensei, if we both attack together with our flames of youth at their maximum, then we'll be able to overpower him. Lee exclaimed. In most cases we would do that, my youthful student. Guy said as he got into a pose that Lee was familiar with. However, there is too much at risk to do that when going in one at a time. To analyze his movements would be better. At the Hyuga compound, even though our Juken requires our Kekkei Genkai to be activated. Hinata said as Niji, Hayashi and several other Hyuga members stared down at the Kurokashi before them. That doesn't mean we can't fight to protect our home. She finished. The opponent was a young man with narrow eyes and short red hair with pointed bangs hanging between his eyes. Going across both sides of his lips were scars of equal size. He wore the regular uniform of the Kurokashi, all black with a cloak, thigh-length trench coat with a long black sash, black pants, knee-length black sandals with the only thing standing out were black fingerless gloves. 12. Hinata-sama, I think it would be better for you to head towards the emergency shelter with the others. Niji voiced his opinion to his cousin. The clan cannot afford to lose its clan head. Without taking her eyes off of the enemy, Hinata replied with fierce determination. It is because I am the clan head that I won't run and hide while our home is being attacked. If you have a problem with that Niji and Aysen, then you may say so after the fight. Niji and secretly Hayashi stared at Hinata before turning to face their opponent. However, secretly Hayashi had a small smile on his face, proud of the way his daughter had grown. Sim's group. Back with Sim and her group, facing off against Madoka, the Inuzuka matriarch gave a look to her Niken companion Kuramaru. As if reading the other's thoughts, Kuramaru gave a nod, thus prompting Sim to begin forming hand signs. Kiba, Hana, I want you two and the rest to watch my back while Kuramaru and I go in. Yes, Mother, Hana said. I still think this is a bad idea. Kiba complained with Akamaru barking in agreement. We don't know what she's fully capable of, Kiba, barked Sim. I'm the best choice to go in first to find out, giving us a better idea of how to beat her. The Inuzuka matriarch turned back to face Madoka, who just had a bored look on her face, as if there was something more interesting to do. Acting quickly, Sim formed the hand signs of the clan's signature technique. Man-beast transformation, double-headed wolf, and then both her and her Niken were consumed in smoke, only to reappear into a giant two-headed dog with black fur. Training Ground 9. Guy crossed his arms before his face and got into a crouching position. Soon chakra began to leak out of his body and his skin began to turn red. Lee noticed this and commented, he's skipping the first two and going up to the third gate. Simon! Gate of Life Kai! Guy shouted and soon the chakra began to explode from Guy's body, causing the ground underneath him to crack and give way to the released chakra. With Shikaka's group. Inoichi! Choza! We're going straight with the Inoshikacho. I'll start us off so you can take control of his mind, Inoichi. Shikaka said as he began forming the hand signs. Right. Inoichi said while Choza got into position. Moving quickly before the Kurokashi could escape, Shikaka murmured, Shadow Imitation Jutsu. And then his shadow began to extend and head straight towards its intended target. With Shibi's group, several of Shibi's Kikeichu began to pour out of the man's body. However, instead of charging from Shibi's body, thousands of insects appeared from below where the Kurokashi was standing. I've already had several of my insects, and more bury underneath you the moment we spotted you. Shibi said as the insects began to form a tornado around the Iryu. Why, you ask? Because I believe you would have a technique to keep them from you or destroy my Kikeichu before they reach you. Secret technique, Insect Tornado, with Kakashi's team. Move now! Kakashi shouted to his students as he held his right wrist with his left hand. Right. Sai and Sakura replied and got into position. Nasa watched those two prepare their own things but moved his sight back onto Kakashi. His left hand began to light up with electricity until it looked like a blade of lightning. Rakiri! Kakashi said as the lightning chakra stabilized in his hand. Now with all 5 Kurokashi that were facing these opponents, Nasa, Madoka, Kizoku, Senshoku and Haijushiki, most of them kept calm looks on their faces while some had smiles instead. As if in sync, the 5 took out a palm-sized medallion out of their pockets. The medallions had a red swirl on it, with it ending at the very center of the medallion. As when they all said the same word, activate. Soon the medallions began to open, starting from the center with the swirl slowly closing in on it, revealing a pitch black hole in its place. Before anyone could react, a massive invisible force came out of the medallion towards those that activated a technique, stunning them upon contact. However, that feeling soon left as the targets soon returned to their normal forms, with Guy going back to his normal skin color, Tsum and Kuramaru reverting back to their forms, Shibi's insects dispersing, Shikaku's shadow returning back to its regular shape, and Kakashi's Rakiri disappearing. Then just as it had opened, the medallions soon all closed with a low clink made afterwards, with their victims all gaping at what just happened. I am possible! Kakashi murmured as he tried forming the hand signs again and got into his usual pose when activating the Chidori or Rakiri. His visible eye widened in horror when he saw nothing happening. Doing a quick check, he molded his chakra momentarily to feel it. He was surprised and relieved that he could still access his chakra. I can still use my chakra. So what happened to my technique? Kakashi thought to himself as he looked at Nasa. Said man had a surprisingly sinister smug look on his face as he held up his medallion that was emitting some lightning from it. That brief moment made Kakashi realize what had just happened. But all that did was leave a horrified expression on his face, and for the first time Kakashi began to show a bit of fear as well, something that Sakura and Sai took notice of. Kakashi-sensei, are you okay? What happened? Sakura asked, worried for her sensei. Shakily while looking at his hands, Kakashi replied, he sealed my techniques. I can't use any of my ninjutsu. The famed copycat shinobi, who said to have copied over 1,000 techniques, exclaimed. On top of the Hokage monument, the Takyagari leader and Shingon looked down at the village below, noticing the shouts of shock and horror. The Takyagari leader merely smirked in amusement at the sound. I guess Konoha discovered the power of the medallions. The leader said, now the nightmare has begun. And then went back into comfortable silence. Shingon glanced at his leader before turning his gaze back to the village, all the while thinking in his head about said objects. The sealing medallions, a project that Sadahiko-sama, His Majesty's father, had thought of and worked on before his death, and now perfected by His Majesty and Naruto-sama as well as improved too. The medallion doesn't seal Kekkai Genkai or the person's chakra as one would assume. It focuses on the target's specialty. Each shinobi, no, each living being has something they are good at. A farmer is good at farming crops and raising animals. A bird's best skill is flying, something that comes naturally to them. They may possess other skills as well, but no matter what, a being will always have something they are good at. That is what the medallion focuses on. It takes away what a person is good at. In a shinobi's case, it takes away the skills such as fighting style, jutsu, or even Kekkai Genkai that they are better at than other skills they have. Even someone as powerful as Kakashi Hatake or Might Guy are nothing more than recently promoted chunin when losing what makes them so formidable. With Sasuke, ha! Baizo yelled as he once more clashed his saber with Sasuke's Chikuto. The force of their swords, both infused with chakra, caused a shockwave to erupt from them and send the parts of the ground flying backwards as a crater formed underneath them. The two soon backed away from one another and Sasuke took that moment to throw a barrage of shuriken at Baizo. However, Baizo merely used his weapon to deflect the shuriken with ease. However, that was merely a distraction as Sasuke then formed several hand seals, Katan, Great Dragon Fire Jutsu, and then he fired a large fireball in the shape of a dragon's head straight towards Baizo. In return, Baizo pointed his sword forward and then did a circle motion with it while murmuring, 10-star arrows. And then, launching from the tip of his sword were 10 blue arrows launched towards Sasuke's attack. When the two collided, they created a large explosion that blocked Sasuke from Baizo's view. But a few seconds later, before Baizo could even blink, a purple energy-colored arrow came out of the smoke straight towards him. However, by some stroke of luck, Baizo managed to move fast enough and jump onto a branch and avoided the arrow. According to the information we gather on both the Uchiha clan history and Sasuke Uchiha, that arrow came from his Susanoo. Baizo thought to himself as he scanned the area for Sasuke. His Majesty warned me to finish the Uchiha off before he could use it to its full extent. I had better equip myself and stick to the high ground, since if the Susanoo is fully completed, then Sasuke can't leave the ground. But I need to absorb enough natural energy to fire such an attack. His thoughts were cut off when a powerful blast of wind struck him, though since his feet were letting out chakra, he struck to the branch. The cause of the blast was from Sasuke's Susanoo, which had indeed gone into its complete form. The form was the upper body of a purple giant with 4 arms, 2 on each side and conjoined at the elbow. The main left arm had a shield bow and a purple orb in the secondary right arm. The being wore a tengu-like layer of armor with jagged teeth around the hood that had 3 edges sticking out, and finally wore magatama earrings. Baizo smirked to himself as he gazed at Sasuke's Susanoo. As the report says, yours does indeed have the appearance of a demon. Sasuke didn't reply except for narrowing his eyes. Then, following a telepathic command from the Uchiha, the Susanoo's main right arm pulled a long purple arrow from the orb in the second right arm and loaded it into the bow. Once it was loaded and Sasuke had a clear sight, the Susanoo fired the arrow. The arrow went at an incredible speed that almost struck Baizo if the Uzumaki hadn't already anticipated that, and jumped out of the way. Uzumaki Fuinjutsu. Light step, Baizo said, and soon 2 small white seals, one underneath each foot, appeared, and then the Uzumaki was standing in the air. But soon Baizo had to move again in order to avoid several Yasaka Magatam projectiles fired by Sasuke's Susanoo. He's going to keep using long-range attacks in order to keep me away from him, Baizo thought as he continued dodging attacks. But suddenly he was struck from behind by what appeared to be another Sasuke. Shadow clone, Baizo thought as he looked back in front of him and saw that he was heading straight towards the original. Said person had formed a purple blade within his Susanoo's second left hand. However, Baizo wasn't someone who could be killed so easily. Reflect, and Baizo raised right hand where a clear, nearly invisible barrier appeared and managed to deflect Susanoo's blade. This stunned Sasuke as he had not expected someone to be able to repel one of Susanoo's blades so easily. Once that was settled with, the Irie decided to take this chance and lunged forward, hoping to strike the Uchiha now while the black head was distracted. But he paused when he saw Sasuke smirking, and before Baizo could react, the second right hand came at him with the orb in its hand. Except this time the orb wasn't purple but black, the black flames of Amaterasu. Baizo didn't even have time to curse as the black orb slammed into him and sent him flying to the side, crashing into the trees nearby with black flames still clinging to his body. Knowing that the man was good as dead, Sasuke deactivated Susanoo and his Sharingan. That man was trying to kill me and most likely trying to stop me from getting to Konoha, which means that the village is in danger too. I better use a summon to fly me there, Sasuke thought to himself. Then he turned around and was about to begin forming the hand seals for the summoning jutsu. He heard a whizzing noise from behind and just barely dodged a chakra-made arrow that could have cleaved his head off along with a small portion of his chest. Sasuke spun around and was honestly shocked to see Baizo get back up and his sword back in his hand. The upper left portion of his jacket and the sleeve were gone, burned away by the black flames. But what shocked Sasuke most was that the flames still clinging to Baizo's body were slowly coming off. I admit that was an impressive attack, Sasuke Uchiha, Baizo said calmly as he flexed his left arm, making some cracking sounds as he moved it, a sign that he was putting bones back into place. But not even the black flames of Amaterasu can penetrate my Shintai. With the older generation of the Inoshikacho, before the 3 could react, Kizoku formed a set of hand seals and ended with the ram seal, muttering, "Fire!" and then launching from the air around him were dozens of blue glowing projectiles. They were all heading towards the older Inoshikacho team. Shit! Move! Inoichi yelled as he jumped to the left while Choza grabbed Shikaku, who looked a little weak after his techniques were sealed, jumped to the right. Though they managed to avoid taking the brunt of the attack, the explosion afterwards inflicted some burns on their bodies. What the hell was that? Choza asked out loud when he landed. That was the Uzumaki advanced chakra-shaped manipulation, Shikaku replied while cursing inside his head. Shit, we were careless to just wait for them to come without trying to find out a single thing about them. I should have noticed that something was off when Mintao, Jiraiya-sama and I concluded that they only sealed someone's Kekkai Genkai. It's probably a good chance that what happened to me happened to others. Indeed, it is our greatest gift as well as the centerpiece of our past downfall, Kizoku suddenly said as he appeared on top of the Akimichi and Nara heads, cutting off Shikaku's thought process. This time surrounding his right arm was a white lance that he brought down onto Choza. But before it could impale the Akimichi, Kizoku suddenly felt a disturbance in his mind, causing him to miss Choza slightly. The Yamanaka, Kizoku thought as he took a brief glance towards said mind reader who had his hands in a familiar form. However, Kizoku suddenly broke the connection quickly, shocking Inoichi. Despite that, the brief interference allowed Choza to land a strong punch into the Uzumaki's chest. But when the two made contact, Choza's eyes widened. It's like his body is made out of iron or something, he thought, since Kozuke had managed to use Shintai to negate the damage he would have taken. But he did jump back to a healthy distance. Damn, that's some body he has. Choza muttered to himself as he and Shikaku joined beside Inoichi, with their opponent standing on the opposite side. We need to inform the others about what just happened, Shikaku said to his former teammates. Inoichi, can you send out a telepathic message to all the shinobi in the village? Not on my own, Inoichi said. But I can transfer the message to my clansmen and have them send it out to others. Then do it, Shikaku said as he pulled out a kunai and looked at Kozuke. We need to warn them immediately about this. With Minato Namikaze. What? Their techniques were sealed. How? Minato thought to himself when he received a telepathic message from Inoichi Yamanaka and several other shinobi of the same clans. It was a unique ability that the Mind Reader clan had managed to develop somewhere in their message. As the name implied, it allowed them to send messages via their mind to others. It wasn't an easy technique due to the stress it put on the user, as well as that they had to know the exact location of the person they're speaking to. If they could locate the person's chakra, then it would be easier. Right now Inoichi was sending out a telepathic message and having other members of his clan transmit them out as well to warn the rest of Konoha. Shit, this is not what we expected. Minato cursed inside his head. I had already figured that they had some kind of way of sealing a Kekkai Genkai, but to seal someone's specialty? This will not end well. Minato paused from thinking to stare at Kane. Said Uzumaki looked somewhat bored, which was probably due to the fact that he was slowly overpowering the Yondaime Hokage. Despite Hiruzen or Minato's incredible physical speed, Kane managed to predict his movements and counteract effectively. The Uzumaki was making it look easy to keep up with Minato's speed while defending himself, and landing some hits on the young Hokage. And then there is his strength. Minato thought as he looked at where his left rib was. Kane had managed to land a hit there, breaking it as well puncturing a lung. It was only thanks to the face that Minato had the basic knowledge of medical ninjutsu that he managed to lessen the injury, though the rib was still broken. His strength is on the same level as Tsunade-sama. But I haven't sensed him focusing any chakra to his fists or other parts of his body. So what's he doing? You should be more worried about yourself than the others. Kane said as he charged forward with his sword raised, intending to cut Minato in two, but the Yondaime Hokage was quicker and managed to jump out of the sword strike. Pulling out his dual swords, Minato charged both with different chakra. The sword in his left hand had lightning chakra while the one in his right hand had wind chakra. Once that was done, Minato Namikaze charged forward. Kane smirked as his sister's husband charged forward. Raising his broadsword upwards, Kane made it appear that he planned on striking Minato. Instead he brought his sword down on his right, blocking a sword strike launched by Minato, much to the Hokage's surprise. Minato couldn't believe it. Kane had somehow managed to figure out his plan of charging straight forward and then shifting to the right for a surprise attack. Again, he predicted my move again? What kind of an ability is this? Looks like you can't figure it out. Kane said as he kicked Minato hard in the chest. This caused the Yondaime Hokage to skid backwards a few feet, somehow keeping his grip on his two swords. But I'm not the kind of guy who reveals his secrets, not even if it's an easy fight. Bastard, Minato cursed silently. Kane meanwhile adjusted his broadsword so that it was pointing at Minato. Then before the Hokage could question what the Uzumaki was doing, a white energy substance began to swirl around the tip of the blade until it formed a white sphere. Once it was done, Kane fired it directly towards Minato. But much to Kane's shock, Minato had already disappeared in a blink of an eye, and this time he had no idea where the Yondaime Hokage went. Where did he dash? But his question was cut off when he was suddenly kicked in the back of the head. The force of the kick sent Kane flying back several feet. Kane managed to recover just as Minato reappeared before the Uzumaki and with both swords, created an X/cut on Kane's chest, tearing off pieces of the Uzumaki's uniform and blood spraying out of his flesh. But Minato didn't stop there. He went even faster. He began leaving several slashes on Kane's body. His arm, legs, back, cheek and shoulders. The Uzumaki's body was covered in numerous scratches in a short amount of time. And while his clan's healing ability was helping the wounds close and his shintai preventing Minato from landing fatal blows. But Kane couldn't keep up with the Yondaime's speed. I'm not 100% sure how he was able to anticipate my attacks before Minato thought as he landed another blow on Kane, this time leaving another scratch on the man's back. But so far it looked like Kane was able to foresee my attack, similar to how the Sharingan can see one's chakra and movements. But if I go fast enough, Kane can't keep up. With that in mind, Minato formed a Rasengan in his hand, intending to deliver the final blow. His target was Kane's chest, which had the heaviest wound, and by striking it with a technique like the Rasengan, Kane would die. Sorry, Kushina, Minato thought to himself as he was about to plunge the Rasengan into Kane. But I have to do this to protect Konoha. But with being mere inches away from the chest, Kane's hand suddenly appeared and grabbed Minato's wrist. Minato's eyes widened in shock as he realized that Kane had stopped him just before said man delivered a strong kick to the Yondaime's chin, sending Minato flying backwards in the air and then crashing into the ground, making a small crater. Humph, about time, Kane muttered as he got up and his broadsword reappeared in his right hand. Minato slowly got up, his body in pain from that hit as he looked up at Kane, now standing up and his wounds healing. Took me a while, but I finally got used to your speed, Kane stated. Minato's eyes widened at that comment. Got used to it? What do you mean? The Hokage asked. What I mean is that I adapted to your fighting style, Kane said and shifted his sword so that it was leaning against his shoulder. My ability is adaptation, to adapt to my surroundings, my enemy's fighting style, skills, techniques and even poison, like creating antibodies. Minato was absolutely shocked when heard that. How is that even possible? He whispered. Of course it's not perfect, and using it is a risk to myself too, Kane said casually as he smirked to himself. I have to experience the thing firsthand before I can adjust to it. Meaning if I want to be immune to a poison, I have to actually be injected with said poison, and the damn ability doesn't kick in right away, so I don't tend to rely on it too much. Then all of a sudden Kane grabbed Minato's left leg. On the sandal he saw a set of seals on it before throwing the blonde-haired man against another wall. This caused Minato to cough up blood from the impact. As I thought you put an altered version of the Hiruzen seal formula on your sandals, Kane said, remembering what he saw. Unlike the actual Hiruzen that teleports you from one place to another, the one you have on your sandals allows you to quicken your speed. In other words, 1 step counts as 10 steps and 2 steps counts as 20 steps. I can see why you were labeled as one of the 5S level threats. Then Cain rammed his sword into the ground so it could stand on its own. Then he began forming hand seals and murmured, "Sacred warrior dance," and suddenly popping into thin air were hundreds of blue glowing floating blades that appeared all around Cain and Minato. They all formed a round cylinder wall around the two. Minato was shocked of such a technique and barely had time to register Cain's next words. Impale him, and an explosion followed soon after. At Konoha's hospital, Tsunade slammed her fist into the ground where Gugen once stood. But the Uzumaki managed to jump out of the way before lunging his right arm forward towards Tsunade. As he did, his right arm began to glow, and soon changed into a long black arm with 4 small blades stuck together to form a large blade. "Give it up, traitor. My ability allows me to change the form and shapes of my arms to whatever I desire. That means I can prepare for whatever opponent I face off against, even you," Gugen yelled as he prepared to skewer the slug Sannin. But Tsunade managed to jump out of the way and then tried to land another of her powerful punches at Gugen, this time moving too fast for the man to dodge. In a desperate attempt to lessen the blow, he used Shinai combined with a shield he created from her left arm. Though the plan did work, Gugen was still sent back several feet when Swana struck his shield and created a large dent in it. "Damn it!" Gugen cursed out loud as his shield reverted back into his hand, revealing the damage he had taken, which was severe. His arm was bleeding and his sleeve was ripped in several places. "You treacherous bitch, I'll kill you slowly for this," Gugen declared. Tsunade raised an eyebrow when he mentioned that word a second time. "Traitor? Why do you keep on referring to me as a traitor? I never did anything to you guys, not to Takyagari but to the clan," Gugen exclaimed, surprising Tsunade and Shizen, who was standing back to provide Tsunade support if needed. "To the clan? Do you mean the Uzumaki clan? What have I done to them?" Gugen scoffed as if Tsunade was playing dumb. "Do not pretend to ignore it, granddaughter of the Shodame Hokage Hashirama Senju, grandniece of Naidame Hokage and Senju Princess of Konoha," Gugen exclaimed as he set off Tsunade's many titles. "You take pride in the Senju name and the techniques of that clan, and yet you show no gratitude for your Uzumaki heritage. Did Mito-sama mean anything to you, or was she just a weak grandmother from the sidelines?" This made Tsunade pause to the point she looked like she turned into a statue. It was true actually, people had always referred to her as the granddaughter of Hashirama Senju and grandniece of Tobarama Senju, both powerful members of the great Senju clan. Never once was she recognized for her relations to the Uzumaki clan or to Mito Uzumaki, the woman who inspired Tsunade to master the art of medical training, or the Ien seal release that she placed on her forehead. And in relations to the Senju clan, she never denied them and was always proud of being part of that clan, yet she never shown any admiration of being part of the Uzumaki clan. "Tsunade-sama, look out!" Shizen's voice cried, snapping said woman out of her thoughts. Tsunade looked up and saw that Gugen was right above her. Both of his arms had transformed into 2 large black fists, intending to crush Tsunade once and for all. "Die, traitor!" he cried as he slammed his left fist down. But what should have been a quick victory changed when Tsunade effortlessly stopped the giant black hand with her hand. This shocked both Gugen and Shizen, especially the former, since Tsunade then had a strong grip on his hand and wasn't letting go. "It's true that I've always been praised for my relations to the Senju clan and my grandfather, and that I've always credited most of my achievements and techniques because of my grandfather's clan, but," she said as she squeezed the hand so hard that it shattered into pieces, reverting back into a normal arm, though now it was bleeding profusely since Gugen didn't power it with Shintai. However, Gugen was still shocked by it, allowing Tsunade to grab the other arm and pulled him down towards her. "But that doesn't mean I have no pride in being an Uzumaki. Neither does it mean I don't love my grandmother or am thankful for what she gave me," Tsunade roared as she slammed her right fist straight into Gugen's chest. "I won't let you bastards sully her and her clan's name by invading our village," she said finally. Gugen let out a silent scream as several bones where Tsunade struck were crushed along with his lungs, ribs and stomach. The force was too great as Gugen's vision went dark and blood flew out of his mouth. Soon his body was sent flying back through several buildings until it finally stopped at the 7th building. Then he limped and fell to the ground, stone dead. Shizen was gaping the power of that punch, having never seen her master deliver such a punch before. "TT, that was incredible, Tsunade-sama. That was the most powerful punch I've ever seen before." Tsunade, however, ignored her student's praise as she looked at her fist. For unknown to Shizen, she was thinking the same thing. "I delivered many strong punches before, but this one felt different. It felt a lot loose, not as concentrated like it usually does when focusing chakra, but not in a bad way, but more natural and less restrained." "What the hell was that, Shizen?" Tsunade shouted. When she heard a "ha" from her student, she continued, "I'm going to call for a barrier team to set up a protective barrier around the hospital. If things get worse, then I'm heading out towards the battlefield." With Jiraiya, near the western border of the village, the Toad Sage was running across the roofs of various buildings, keeping his eye out for any signs the enemy. So far he came into several confrontations, which usually resulted him in saving other Konohanin with the enemy running or just moving on. They focused on the others but ignore me. Why is that? They should know that I'm one of the largest threats here in the village, so why would they ignore me? Jiraiya thought to himself as he jumped over towards another roof. But when he landed on this roof he noticed that he wasn't alone. Standing before him was another man, one of the invaders actually. He wore the Kurokishi black cloak. On his head was a black cowboy hat with a red uzumaki symbol at the front, while he had wild red shoulder-length hair tucked behind his ears. His skin was tanned with red fuzz on his chin. Underneath the man's cloak was a waist-length black jacket, while underneath it was a white shirt. Covering his hands were black gloves and a black golden belt around his jacket too, with a metal wolf skull at the center of the belt. The belt was holding up black pants with dark gray fur on the lower legs and black sandals. 13. Jiraiya smirked as he got into a fighting stance. So someone finally steps up to the plate, eh? Jiraiya asked sarcastically. The man did not reply except for suddenly disappearing before Jiraiya's very eyes. The Toad Sage barely had any time to react when the Jiraiya pulled out an ornate pistol from somewhere within his cloak and pointed it straight at Jiraiya's face in point-blank range and fired a smooth chakra beam from the pistol. Jiraiya, however, managed to dodge it easily and flip sideways to the ground below. But the man was upon him once more, this time with two pistols out, one in each hand. He fired another chakra bolt from his left pistol that Jiraiya managed to dodge before the Toad Sage delivered a powerful punch to the back of the Kurokishi's head. But if the man showed any signs of pain, then he hit it well while keeping his hat still on. While the Kurokishi landed on the ground and Jiraiya prepared to deliver a Rasengan finisher to his opponent, the Kurokishi spun around and fired two chakra bolts from both his pistols as well as reveal his dull gray eyes. One chakra bolt Jiraiya managed to dodge again, but this time the other managed to pierce through the Toad Sage's right shoulder, causing a decent amount of blood to come flying out. Jiraiya winced in pain as he clutched the hole in his shoulder as backed away a few feet from his opponent, who merely stared at him with a blank expression. Damn, knew they would send a tough one after me but didn't think you'd be that tough. Jiraiya mumbled to himself just as his enemy raised his pistols and fired again. Except this time he fired what appeared to be multiple mini fireballs. With great speed that only a Kage-level shinobi could keep up with, Jiraiya formed the hand seals, Doton, mud wall jutsu, and then a giant wall of earth popped out of the ground between the Toad Sage and the oncoming projectiles. When the fireballs made contact with the wall of earth, the two created an explosion that forced Jiraiya back a block. But that didn't mean that his opponent would let him relax, because as soon as Jiraiya had managed to land safely on his feet, the Iryu was upon him instantly. However, Jiraiya managed to form a Rasengan and repel the chakra bullet that the Kurokishi fired at him, and then jumped over the Uzumaki. Once he was above his opponent, Jiraiya formed some more hand seals, Katon, flame bullet jutsu, and exhaled a large fireball from his mouth towards the Kurokishi. The gap was so small that the Uzumaki would have little time to dodge it. But unknown to Jiraiya, the Kurokishi muttered, Nova bullet, and then fired from one of his pistols a large beam of chakra that was colored in orange-red. The two attacks collided and exploded, but the force mostly sent Jiraiya flying backwards and crashing into a nearby building. Shit, this is going to be harder than I thought, Jiraiya muttered to himself as he got back to his feet. With Kushina and Mito's fight, Kushina threw a kunai with her special explosive tag attached to it at the masked Naruto. Naruto, knowing that deflecting it would be pointless, decided to jump back to avoid the blast, but instead felt his back slamming against the stone wall. Naruto could tell that Mito had set that up, since the data said that Mito was capable of using water, wind and earth release elements. But Naruto was prepared for this, as well as Kushina's special explosive tag. Unlike normal explosive tags that only released a single explosion, these tags had several thin layers of tags on top of each other. So when the first one went off, the explosion it created would set off the one right on top of it, and so on. That's what made it so deadly, since the blast radius was wider, large and more powerful than what a person was normally used to. Kushina and Mito watched as the massive explosion consumed their masked opponent, but when the smoke cleared it revealed that he was still alive with minimal injuries and some burn marks on his clothing and a crack on his mask. I can't believe he managed to withstand your special explosive tag, Mom, Mito murmured in surprise. She knew how powerful those tags were, and there were very few that would survive such an explosion, and those that did were heavily burned or at least missing body parts. Kushina didn't reply because just as the smoke finished clearing, she was assaulted by a powerful downward sword strike from the masked Naruto's sword. She had just managed to raise her sword up to block the oncoming strike, but the contact between the two blades caused a small shockwave that sent Mito flying back a few feet and caused cracks in the ground to appear below Kushina's feet. He's using Shitai to power the strength of his regime, Kushina thought to herself as she managed to do a substitution with a nearby rock, which Naruto cut in two. Kushina managed to regroup with Mito, who had unsealed two katana. The older Uzumaki woman was contemplating her next move when she suddenly felt the disappearance of a large chakra source, one that was familiar. Mito also felt it too and looked at her mother worryingly. That was Dad's chakra, she muttered. Mom, you don't think? She asked her currently shocked and concerned mother, as she felt her husband's chakra fade away. Naruto also felt the chakra source fade away slowly and thought to himself, guess Uncle Kane took care of Namikaze. Up on top of the Hokage monument, Shingon, who was standing alongside his leader, looked up for a moment, sensing something. It appears that Kane-san has defeated Minato Namikaze. So it seems, the leader said in agreement as he continued gazing at the village of Konoha as the cries of the dying and the fighting continued throughout the day with smoke and fires rising into the sky. I admit I thought that they would have put up more resistance, but I guess that what happens when a village falls to arrogance and corruption. Shall we begin the final phase, sire? Shingon asked his leader. The leader was about to reply when suddenly there was a massive explosion from the western side of the village. Shingon looked towards the source of the explosion and commented, "For Kurokishi's chakra signature have just disappeared." He exclaimed in shock. Who could have done that? The leader, however, smiled sinisterly as he stood up. It seems like someone is angry with me. Then he slowly turned around and saw none other than Hiruzen Sarutobi, in his ninja gear and with a bloodied face, which made his intense glare all the more intimidating. Am I right, Hiruzen Sarutobi? You are indeed correct, Sukuna Uzumaki. The Sandaime Hokage replied as he released the corpse of an Kurokishi that was in his hands. As the body plopped on the ground, Hiruzen continued. I've decided to begin to make up for my many past mistakes by beginning with you, Sukuna. I'm going to destroy you. With Sasuke Uchiha, with the area around them already in ruins due to the destructive force of their fight, Sasuke Uchiha and Baizo Uzumaki continued their fight, each hoping to gain an advantage over the other. Katon, Phoenix Sage Fire Jutsu. Sasuke murmured and then unleashed a volley of small fireballs towards Baizo. However, the Uzumaki merely waved his left arm and for a brief second a mirror-like wind followed suit. When the fireballs reached Baizo, instead of hitting him, they all went past him and struck the nearby area. Once that was done with, Baizo raised his left hand towards Sasuke. Suddenly large ball of blue lightning formed from the palm of his hand before being fired at a quick speed towards the young Uchiha. Sasuke managed to react quickly and used Susanu's ribcage to block the attack. Shit, Baizo cursed to himself. I should have killed him before he had time to bring out Susanu. While its offensive nature is formidable, I can just use my seal of barriers to avoid the damage. It's the defense it possesses that poses a problem. I can't seem to land any solid hits on him, and it's impossible to seal it due to the changes of his chakra. I need a plan to use that ability of his against him, that's it. Baizo thought before he noticed a shadow upon him. Looking up, the Uzumaki saw that Sasuke, covered by Susanu's ribcage and one of its arms had formed, with a blade in the hand, was coming down on him. However, Baizo managed to jump out of the way, avoiding the most likely fatal attack. Damn, this guy is not making things easy. Sasuke thought to himself as he cancelled Susanu to conserve chakra. Killing him would be the easiest thing to do, but risking the chance of losing possible good information on Takiagari is something I would like to avoid. He paused while activating Susanu again, forming a hand to grab Baizo, only for the man to jump out of the way again. As long as I keep Susanu up now and then I can block his attacks while trying to figure out a way to incapacitate him. Baizo, however, had other ideas. When he was a good distance away, he swiped his left hand, which had chakra around it, across his saber's blade, thus spreading the chakra around the blade. Before Sasuke had time to figure out what he was doing, Baizo pointed his sword forward and fired what looked like a see-through ball that was slowly getting bigger. Seeing this, Sasuke immediately activated Susanu to its complete form in order to deflect the attack, but to his shock the attack did not strike Susanu head-on but engulfed Sasuke and his Susanu, leaving the young Uchiha trapped with a giant clear dome. Baizo smirked at the scene. Activating your Susanu was a foolish mistake, Sasuke Uchiha. For doing that you have hastened your own death, the Uzumaki stated. Ignoring the man's words, Sasuke attempted to break out of the dome of chakra with Susanu, hoping to use the giant's power to dissipate it. To his surprise, however, the dome did not disappear, but instead his Susanu broke apart a little along with it squeezing down on him. This caused Sasuke to wince in pain as his own defense turned on him. What the hell? Sasuke asked himself as he tried to get his bearings back together. Outside, Baizo laughed maniacally when he noticed that the dome began to shrink around Sasuke. Did you believe brute force could break that dome? He yelled mockingly. He paused as he watched how Susanu was beginning to both peel apart while shrinking, coincidentally crushing Sasuke within as a result. Baizo continued. His Majesty blessed me with the seal of spheres. I can create spheres of any size to protect me from attacks or trap my opponents within them. In this case, the sphere will keep you trapped in there, and any attempts of escaping with will cause it to bounce your attacks back at you while shrinking. With your Susanu activated, that dome will cause your own technique to crush you until you're nothing but dust. And with that said, Baizo turned around, leaving Sasuke to his fate. Now that he has been taken care of, I should report to His Majesty and await his next orders. No sooner had Baizo said that did a sword appear right in front of him, heading straight for him. Because of its speed, along with the fact that his Shintai wasn't activated at the time, Baizo could do nothing as the sword went right through his neck. Gaha! Baizo choked as blood flew out of his mouth and his body falling backwards. The last thing he saw was the sword that killed him coming out, sliding back into a snake's mouth with said snake disappearing into the shadows. The dome created by Baizo soon dispersed along with said man's death. Once it was gone, Sasuke deactivated his Sharingan and his Susanu, taking deep breaths while his body was covered with cuts. Even though he wasn't in there for so long, the damage it had done to his Susanu, and in return injured him greatly. Who the hell was that anyway? Sasuke thought to himself as he noticed Baizo's body lying on the ground, the blood coming out of his wound already staining the ground in red. However, the moment he asked himself that question, he felt something cold and sharp against his neck. Shocked at the sudden feeling and that he couldn't detect the person, Sasuke turned around to see who the wielder was and was surprised beyond belief of the person who saved him. "You," Sasuke murmured. "Kakuku, we meet again," Sasuke-kun, Orochimaru said with his yellow eyes looking directly at Sasuke while his Kusanagi, still covered with Baizo's blood, pressed against the Uchiha's neck. Back at Konoha, with Jiraiya, Jiraiya's eyes widened when he suddenly felt a large force of chakra being exerted. However, he came back to his senses in order to avoid another blast of chakra from Jinjo's pistol. Jiraiya responded by throwing several shuriken at Jinjo, which the Uzumaki dodged easily. Their battle had caused much damage to the buildings around them. In fact, none of them could really be called buildings anymore, with only a few bits of stone and wood still standing, and Jiraiya was at a loss of figuring out his opponent's abilities, let alone defeating him. Jinjo had very good aim with those pistols of his and surprisingly was good at using them for melee combat. Worse, he was fast, very fast, disappearing from one spot to another at a speed equal to Minato's Hiruzen. Jiraiya could barely form hand seals or even going into sage mode. "So you felt it too, didn't you?" Jinjo suddenly asked, pausing in his assault on Jiraiya. Looking at the toad sage, he continued, "Someone strong and foolish has decided to challenge his majesty." Jiraiya smirked at Jinjo. "Don't underestimate my sensei. He may be old, but he still has enough strength to hold his title as the god of shinobi," the toad sage replied confidently. "He won't lose to the likes of you, and I know you could sense the disappearance of 4 chakra signatures belonging to your allies. If that was supposed to intimidate me, then give up," Jinjo said with a sigh. "Besides, whatever the outcome will be, you won't be alive to see it," he finished before raising his pistol and firing a large beam of chakra at Jiraiya, and their battle restarted. On top of the Hokage monument, Shingon, who was standing by the sidelines as his leader was facing against the Sandaime Hokage, noticed the 4 bodies of the Kurokishi that Hiruzen had killed. The 4 people were Higashi Uzumaki, who had the seal of mirrors, Chijima Uzumaki, who had the seal of freezing a person's movements, Shiko Uzumaki, who had the seal of elastic properties, and finally Kaniku Uzumaki, who had the ability to make people question themselves. Higashi was the most muscular of the 4, though not the largest, despite being slightly taller than the average person. His red hair was not only short but shaved so that he would have 3 red stripes as well. Underneath his Kurokishi cloak he wore a sleeveless jacket that was zipped up, and his pants were long, though the odd part was that he had black straps on the pants, 6 on each leg. Strapped to his wrists were his dual mini-shields, though they were severely cracked. Next up was Chijima, who was lean yet muscular man with pale skin and red hair that was formed in a wild rocker style with the bangs going down the sides of his face. His jacket was unzipped, revealing his chest, which had the clan symbol drawn on it. Chijima's pants were baggy with holes in the center, thus revealing his kneecaps. Shingon noticed that Chijima's tomahawk, A/N, for those who don't know, that is a type of axe, was lying on his body, broken in half. Beside him was Shiko, who was the largest of the 4 and a veteran back in the Second Shinobi War. His fair-skinned head was bald, but he did have red bangs that connected to his beard, which went around his mouth and over his chin. Underneath the Iria cloak he wore what appeared to be a black button suit and matching pants with a red tie tucked underneath the former. He also wore dark sandals that went under the pants, and lying beside him was his broken dual tonfa. And finally there was Kaniku, the only female in the group. She was about regular height, with fair skin and an attractive body. Her red hair, with a dye of black on 3 bangs, had a single braid hanging down the right side of her face. Her Iria uniform was normal looking with the cloak and all, except that she wore a short skirt with short pants underneath it, and long sandals that went up to her knees. Besides her lifeless right hand was a tanto with the guard taking the appearance of the clan's crest. After examining the 4 corpses, Shingon looked up at Hiruzen and was surprised to see little to no wounds on the retired Hokage's body. True, there were small scratches and dirt, but no sign of actual struggle on his person. To be able to defeat 4 Kurokishi that I sent, one of them having fought in the Second Shinobi World War as a jonin, and not even come out the least bit fatigued, Shingon thought to himself as he looked at the Hokage's eyes, which were focused on Jakuna. It appears Hiruzen Sarutobi is more powerful than we originally presumed. Back with said man, Hiruzen and Jakuna were having an intense staring contest. Old memories from over 5 decades ago came flooding into each person's head all the way to their last battle after the fall of Uzushio. The results of said fight were that Jakuna was rendered unconscious and then carried away by fellow clansmen, while Hiruzen needed immediate medical attention because of the wound Jakuna gave him. A wound that went from his left shoulder down to the right side of his waist. A wound so deep that if it had went any deeper would have bisected the Sandaime Hokage in 2. And now they were meeting each other again, except this time Jakuna's forces were invading Konoha, overwhelming the majority of the village's forces with ease. Hiruzen couldn't help but notice that Jakuna looked younger than the Sandaime Hokage originally thought he would be. Even with his clan's long lives, the elder Uzumaki should have at least a few strands of gray hair. And yet he looks around the same age as Jiraiya-kun and Tsunadeheim. Could it be some kind of seal that he designed over the past few years? Hiruzen thought to himself, but pushed it to the back of his mind so he could focus on important matters. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of silence, Jakuna smirked and said, "I'm amazed that you managed to defeat 4 of my Kurokishi so easily. although they may have lowered their guard during the fight, which would be their own fault. No sooner had he finished that sentence did Hiruzen strike, appearing right before Sukuna with great speed, his adamantine staff already in his hand. Bringing it down with great speed, Hiruzen forced Sukuna to raise his left arm, infused with shitai, to block the attack. Despite that, Sukuna showed some signs of staggering under the diamond-made staff's weight. "Sire!" Shingon shouted as he tried to make his way towards his leader, but the wind pressure from the contact those two made, combined with the chakra they were both releasing, were causing Shingon to be more focused on not falling off his feet, or over the edge. So he jumped back several feet in order to remain a safe distance from the two combatants. "I see that even after 5 decades you still haven't changed, Sukuna," Hiruzen said as he jumped backwards to give him some distance from his opponent. "You still show the same lack of compassion for your subordinates even when they're dead." Then the Sandaime Hokage formed hand seals. Katan, Fire Dragon Flame Bullet Jutsu, and Hiruzen fired stream of flames at his opponent, engulfing him in flames. But Sukuna managed to jump through the flames unharmed before he took any serious damage and landed safely on the ground, with Hiruzen in front of him, and the flames behind him. Sukuna smirked a little while secretly focusing his healing ability towards his left arm, which had a broken bone due to the strike from Hiruzen's attack. "Lack of compassion? On the contrary, I have much compassion for my clan and kin. But no amount of compassion will protect them on the field of battle. The moment that we entered the battlefield they were on their own to survive and they knew it." Then he looked at Hiruzen who was glaring at him. "However, you haven't changed a bit, Hiruzen Sarutobi, even after getting old. It brings me back to see how easily angered you'd get when something displeases you." "Enough talk," Hiruzen said as he thrust the adamantine staff forward. The staff began to extend at a fast rate that many would have trouble following, but Sukuna managed to dodge the strike easily and then raised his left hand towards Hiruzen. From the hand a ball of chakra formed before being fired towards the retired Hokage. However, Hiruzen wasn't one to be easily hit by such an attack, and with great acrobatic skills he managed to do a flip over the chakra blast while keeping a firm grip of his staff. He soon found himself in midair right above Sukuna, and deciding to use this to his advantage he reverted his weapon back to its regular size. Once that was done he made a nosedive towards his opponent, intending to land a blow on Sukuna, adding some chakra to strengthen the attack. But Sukuna seemed to have predicted this as he raised his right arm and made a grabbing motion with his hand. A second afterwards a small round-shaped object, which turned out to be a smaller version of the Uzumaki clan's crest, appeared from underneath Sukuna's cloak. It flew into the air and right into the awaiting palm, which was soon swung upwards to meet Hiruzen's strike. The result of the two attacks colliding was the release of a massive wave of chakra that could be felt all over the village. With the battle between Kushina, Mito, and Naruto, the battle between, unknown to Kushina and Mito though, family was interrupted when they felt two massive chakra sources spiking and spreading throughout Konoha. The sudden blast caused Mito to stagger a bit since she wasn't prepared for such a thing. But Kushina and Naruto held their ground, with the former being used to such powerful bursts of chakra and the latter having expecting such an event happening. However, Kushina was surprised when both chakra signatures were familiar. This is, but before she could continue Naruto chuckled, catching both girls' attention. "Looks like Hiruzen's finally on the field," he said when he stopped chuckling but still had a smile hidden beneath his mask. "However, against Gigi, the old monkey won't stand a chance." Mito was about to make a retort about how Hiruzen wasn't going to lose when Kushina spoke first. "Gigi? You're his grandson?" she asked. "Yes, I am indeed his grandson," Naruto replied. "I owe him a great debt, as do we all. All he requires of us is to follow him, and we will, as the clan shall stand united, and we will gain our revenge." Kushina looked at her masked opponent in shock. "You're going to follow him just because he helped you? Are you actually willing to die for him?" she asked incredulously. "I wouldn't expect someone like you to understand the meaning of family loyalty. After all, look what happened to your son," Naruto said. Kushina frowned at the comment, getting angry about how people keep reminding her of her failure with Naruto. She wanted nothing more than to find him and make amends with her son. Naruto just glanced at his mother, noticing the look of regret and pain in her face, but he didn't really care. Sure, he knew that his horrible childhood was because of Danzo trying to manipulate his parents. That still didn't mean that Minato and Kushina were completely innocent. They didn't do a thing to stop the shinobi and civilians from attacking and abusing him as a child. He was, however, grateful that Sasuke and Hinata were engaged elsewhere. While he knew that killing them would be inevitable, he didn't want to be the one to kill the only two that were kind to him as a child. "Enough of this pointless talking. My orders are to kill the both of you." And with that, Naruto momentarily sealed his sword before clapping both hands together. Then as he pulled them apart he murmured, "Shining lunar spear." And then a blue-colored spear of chakra appeared in between Naruto's hands. Before Kushina and Mito could react, Naruto threw the glowing spear straight towards them. Fortunately, they had enough time to jump out of the way, and the spear hit the building behind them. When it did, it released a large explosion that destroyed everything nearby and sent the two Uzumaki females flying. Naruto shot towards Kushina, who was closer to him since the explosion sent her in his direction. But Kushina wasn't a seasoned veteran shinobi for nothing. She immediately recovered and managed to bring up her sword in time to block Naruto's sword strike. "Well, I guess killing you while you were distracted was just wishful thinking," Naruto muttered to himself before going in for another attack. However, to the surprise of Naruto, Kushina and Mito, a fast-moving image appeared and grabbed Naruto, pulling him away from his fight. The only words Kushina heard was Naruto saying, "Uncle." Back with Hiruzen and Sukuna. After making contact with Sukuna and failing to injure/kill him, Hiruzen did a double backward spin in mid-air before landing, giving him some distance from his opponent. From there he saw that Sukuna had brought out his weapon, a ornate sword looking similar to a Miao Dao that had a round red-black two-handed handle with a black circular guard. Hiruzen noticed that Sukuna's clothes were slightly singed, giving the old Hokage some satisfaction. "I see that you've finally pulled out your sword," the elder Sarutobi commented. "By the sound of it you wanted me to draw it," Sukuna said as he faced Hiruzen. "I plan on crushing your entire being and that includes your sword," Hiruzen said as he spun his staff. "Now then, let's continue," the retired Hokage said before charging forward. Sukuna swung his sword sideways to meet Hiruzen. The elder Sarutobi slammed his adamantine staff into the ground and stopped Sukuna's blade. Using his staff as a stepping stool, Hiruzen did a flip in the air over Sukuna. Then focusing chakra into his left fist, the Sandaime Hokage tried to deliver a powerful punch right towards Sukuna's face. But the Emperor of the Takyaguri managed to leap backwards just in time and Hiruzen's fist impaled the ground and formed a crater instead. Sukuna, as he flew backwards, swung his sword downwards and released a large arc slash of chakra towards Hiruzen. However, Hiruzen merely swatted it to the side with a swing of his staff. But that gave Sukuna to launch a sword thrust at Hiruzen, straight towards the former Hokage's chest. But when the sword impaled him, Hiruzen and his staff poof into smoke, revealing it to be a shadow clone. Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu. Hiruzen's voice cried from above Sukuna. The Takyaguri Emperor looked up and saw hundreds of shuriken rain down upon him. At the same time a pair of hands shot out of the ground underneath Sukuna and grabbed the Uzumaki's legs. Sukuna commented. "This is becoming boring," he said as he waved his left hand above him. Aurora color energy followed his hands and soon the barrage of shuriken was scattered everywhere, not harming Sukuna at all. That must be his Ketsuen ability, blood mark. Hiruzen thought as he watched Sukuna stab his clone underground. The clone soon dispersed and Sukuna's legs were freed. Hiruzen frowned as he landed and faced Sukuna again. "I just need to hold out for a little longer. You know, I've noticed that you've been shadow clones a lot during our fight," Sukuna said as he looked back at Hiruzen. "I've known you for a long time, Hiruzen, and I know that using shadow clones constantly isn't your style, especially at your age. So what are you up to?" Hiruzen smirked, like he knew something that Sukuna didn't. "Well, my opponent isn't someone I can defeat with my normal style. But don't worry, this battle will end very soon," Hiruzen said as he began building up a massive amount of chakra. Sukuna's eyes widened when he felt Hiruzen's chakra build up. He can't be building up so much chakra from nowhere. That means Sukuna's eyes widened as he figured it out. Aiming at the Sandaime Hokage, Sukuna raised his left hand, which began to glow. "Arrow bullet," he said, and from the palm of his hand he fired a spinning blue chakra arrow the size of a person's arm. The arrow flew at Hiruzen at lightning speed and quickly exploded once it reached the former Hokage. Sukuna watched the smoke rise from the explosion, staring at it impassively while waiting to see if Hiruzen comes out of the smoke. After a few minutes and seeing no signs of Hiruzen, Sukuna smirked with satisfaction. But that feeling left quickly when a voice behind him said, "You should know that an attack like that wouldn't kill me." And before he could react, something strong slammed into Sukuna's back, sending the Takyaguri Emperor flying forwards and skidding across the ground. He managed to stop himself before he reached the edge of the Hokage monument, bruised and scratched, while looking with a shocked expression. Standing before him and unharmed was Hiruzen Sarutobi with his adamantine staff in hand. However, the Sandaime Hokage looked different. He now had several brown marks, tattoos even, going across his face in an intricate pattern. Furthermore, a large amount of chakra was radiating off of Hiruzen now and Sukuna instantly knew what it was. "This is Senjutsu, Monkey Sage Mode," Hiruzen finished for Sukuna as he stared at the Uzumaki. "I must admit it has been some time since I last used this and I wasn't sure I could do it at my age, but I'll manage for now." "But how?" Sukuna asked as he got up, his right hand still gripping his sword's handle. The Uzumaki could feel several bones broken from the last attack, and it was only thanks to a quick use of Shintai that Sukuna wasn't bleeding. It would be a while for his enhanced healing to mend the bones. In order to go into Sage Mode you need to absorb natural energy, and to do that you need to be absolutely still. Absorb it how? Monkey Sage Mode is a bit different from other variants, Hiruzen said as he lifted his staff over his shoulder. "With Enma in his staff mode he can absorb natural energy from me because when he's in that form, he's technically still since I'm the one moving him. Furthermore, I had 2 clones meditating somewhere safe absorbing energy too. Once they were done they would disperse and the natural energy they gathered would go to me." Sukuna glared at Hiruzen. "I'm amazed of how far you would go in order to defeat me, that you would use something that is very risky," Sukuna commented. "True, but it was necessary in order to defeat you," Hiruzen replied. "As it was one of the weaknesses of your medallion." The comment made the Takyaguri Emperor's eyes widen before narrowing at Hiruzen. "What?" Sukuna almost growled. "Losing your specialty is indeed a dangerous and terrible thing to happen to anyone," Hiruzen said and continued. However, to even know someone's specialty you must first research it. Along with your mastery of seals, your clan valued information and knowledge greatly too. In other words, you people had to research the skills of the shinobi who presented the greatest threat, because without that you couldn't steal things like Kekkei Genkai techniques or a person's fighting style. And my style has changed much the last time we fought. The second thing is that in order for you to even steal it, not only does the person have to do it before you, they have to do hand seals. Hand seals are the most primary requirement for any kind of jutsu. If the person doesn't do it or you can't see it, then your medallion can't steal it, can it? Hiruzen asked Sukuna. Sukuna said nothing, but his glare seemed to have increased at Hiruzen's explanation. And then there is senjutsu. Hiruzen continued. Senjutsu means I constantly absorb natural energy, which is an outside source of power, into my body. Your medallion won't be able to absorb that much energy because for those who are inexperienced will just turn into stone. Then Hiruzen got into a stance where he gripped his staff with both hands and pulled it back a bit. The front was aiming directly at Sukuna. Are you ready, Enma? We're ending this in one move. Hiruzen said. Ready, Sarutobi, let's do it. Enma replied in his staff form. What? Sukuna growled when he heard what Hiruzen said. The comment made the Uzumaki angry and insulted, feeling like he was being underestimated. You kill me in one move? Don't make me laugh, Hiruzen Sarutobi. As if a peaceful, lazy old man such as you can kill me in one what? Jakuna's rant ended midway when he realized he couldn't move. Looking down, Jakuna saw that written on his legs were seal formulas. Weight seals? But when? Then his eyes widened in realization as he recalled something grabbing his legs earlier. The shadow clone. By the look on your face you realize that my clone earlier had placed weight seals on your legs to slow you down a bit. Hiruzen said as he gathered chakra around his staff. Though I'm surprised that a seal master such as yourself didn't notice it sooner. Perhaps you're also going a little senile too. Hiruzen joked before getting serious again. This is the end, Jakuna. Senpo. Jakuna grit his teeth as he tried to move. But the seals on his legs and the wound on his back basically made him immobilized. Hiruzen Sarutobi. Jakuna roared at the Sandaime Hokage as a last act of defiance. Monkey King Iron Fist. Hiruzen roared and thrust his adamantine staff forward. Like a cannonball shooting out of a cannon, a force of concentrated chakra in the form of a fist shot out of the staff straight towards Jakuna. Everything after that happened in a second, because Jakuna was now standing stone still with a large hole in his chest. The Takyagari Emperor had a look of shock and disbelief even as he fell backwards, landing on the ground back first. Hiruzen was panting heavily, leaning on his staff for support as sweat rolled down his wrinkled face. The marks on him faded as his sage mode deactivated. Enma quickly changed into his normal form, helping his old friend stay on his feet. Are you okay, Sarutobi? The Monkey King asked. I'm fine, Enma, Hiruzen panted. Looking at Jakuna's body, the Sandaime Hokage was positive that the Uzumaki was dead. I'm really getting too old for this. If we had attacked a minute later I wouldn't been able to hold sage mode anymore. Hiruzen said as he finally managed to gain his bearings. Enma smirked at his old friend. True, but we won though there are still invaders in the village. He remarked. Indeed, but with their leader dead, the enemy's morale will go down and might even retreat if given the chance. Hiruzen commented as he looked down at the village. Who's dead? Eyes widening, Hiruzen and Enma spun around at the voice only to be blasted by an invisible force of energy matter. The two friends were sent flying backwards, blood coming out of their mouths from the impact of the surprise attack. Once they managed to recover, Hiruzen and Enma looked up and were utterly shocked to see, standing before them, an unharmed and living Jakuna Uzumaki, with no hole in his chest, and who looked back at them with a mischievous smirk. How? Hiruzen murmured at what he was seeing. How the hell are you alive? Enma roared at Jakuna as the Monkey King got up. How am I still alive? Jakuna asked mockingly with his smirk still on. Simple really, I wasn't the one you were fighting. He was. Jakuna finished as he pointed towards the body. Hiruzen followed his finger, and his jaw dropped in horror when he looked at the body. Gone was the corpse of Jakuna Uzumaki. Now lying on the ground with a hole in his chest was the mangled form of Danzo Shimura. The man also had a prosthetic right arm replacing his Mokutan arm with the Ten Sharingan. But how the chakra signature he was giving out, it was definitely yours, and when did you even? You forget I'm a seal master, Hiruzen Sarutobi. Is it so hard to imagine that I could do something as create a seal to forcibly control someone while also having them take my appearance along with my chakra signature, personality, memories and techniques? Jakuna said as if he was talking to a child. As for when I did it before the start of the invasion. Hiruzen's eyes widened when he realized the implications of that sentence, and Jakuna saw it. Exactly, the Danzo you were speaking to in the IT building was actually me, and I have to say those suppression seals were easy to remove. But don't worry, those root agents are the real deal, though they had no idea that their leader was a fake. Why would you do that? Hiruzen demanded as he glared at Jakuna. Simple really, I wanted to visit the Uzumaki temple outside the village. Jakuna answered, earning a gasp from Hiruzen. It had things in there I wanted to get. Also, despite its less graceful appearance, it's still important mean, and I wanted no interruptions. So I had Danzo take my place to shift attention from me. Jakuna soon drew his sword and raised it towards Hiruzen. So what now, Sandaime Hokage? Did you use up all your chakra and strength fighting my fake? Sukuna asked mockingly. The taunt angered Hiruzen and he acted quickly, not knowing he was being pulled into a trap. Shut up. Shadow clone. Hiruzen's sentence was cut off as he felt many of his techniques disappearing from him as it was all pulled by a black vortex into the medallion that Sukuna held. The Uzumaki looked at the former Hokage. While you're correct on that, we require information on the person's abilities. If the target needs in their chakra and begins forming the technique, we can steal it. Also, the first requirement can be overruled if the user is stronger than the target. That and only someone with biologically born Uzumaki blood can use these, which is why Danzo, in my appearance, didn't use it at all, Sukuna explained before looking at the medallion. Now then, perhaps I should summon some monkeys and have them attack the village. You bastard! Enma roared when he heard Sukuna suggestion and charged towards the Uzumaki. But Sukuna only spared him a glance before firing another wave of energy matter that upon impact with the Monkey King exploded. The explosion didn't kill Enma, but the injuries he sustained forced him back to the summoning world. Enma! Hiruzen shouted as he watched his friend disappear. But a shadow soon fell over him. Looking up, Hiruzen saw Sukuna before him, his sword raised and covered in chakra. A malicious smile on his face, Sukuna said 3 words to him. Farewell, Hiruzen Sarutobi. Before he brought his sword down on the Sandaime Hokage, back with Shingon, the Uzumaki was making his way towards Sukuna. He had felt the disguised Danzo's chakra disappear before sensing his leader's chakra, and soon after the chakra of Hiruzen's disappearing. It was clear that the battle was over and who the victor was too. Looks like it's over, a voice said. Not even flinching, Shingon looked as Kane appeared before him, a bit dirty and rough around the edges, but the second in command of the Takyagari looked fine. The Konoha shinobi were all in distress when Hiruzen's chakra disappeared. Their morale is way down now, Kane commented. I see, Shingon said as he and Kane walked over towards their leader. How was your fight, Kane-san? The captain of the Kurokushi asked the son of the Takyagari emperor. Kind of easy really, though I guess I got lucky, Kane said, earning a questioned look from Shingon. If Minato had set his kunai around the area where we fought, he could have easily overwhelmed me despite my seal's ability. That and his feelings got in the way, making it less difficult for me to beat him. That's good to hear, Kane-san, Shingon replied. What about your nephew? I sensed that he was fighting his mother and sister. He was, but I pulled him out before coming here, Kane answered. Father wants him to be ready, and having him fighting right now would make him displeased. Naruto wasn't happy about it, but he didn't argue. We managed to slip away without Kushina spotting me. Kane took a breather before continuing. I'll be heading back now to check on the others. From what I can tell, we lost 5 members including the 4 Hiruzen killed. Who was the 5th? Shingon asked in surprise that another of Kurokushi were killed. Gugen, done in by Tsunade, Kane replied. And I'm not sure, but I think Baizo is dead too. Anyway, I'm going. You should go and check on His Majesty, Kane said before heading down towards the village. Shingon just watched Kane disappear before heading towards Sukuna. Said person had his sword in his hand, with the weapon covered in blood that dripped onto the ground. Lying before him was the body of Hiruzen Sarutobi. He had his face against the ground and a large cut going down the left side of his body with a large amount of blood coming out. Lying aimlessly on the side was Hiruzen's helmet, split in 2 from Sukuna's sword strike. Your Majesty, Shingon said as he approached his leader and bowed. Sukuna just gazed down at the fallen form of Hiruzen, a look of pity on his face towards the former Hokage. Finally he turned spoke to Shingon. We're finished here, Shingon. Let's go. Yes, sire, Shingon replied with a bow. As Sukuna moved to walk away, he stopped when he felt something grab his right leg. Looking down, he saw that Hiruzen had grabbed it with his right hand, a dying attempt to stop Sukuna. Humph, how pitiful, Sukuna muttered as he calmly cut off Hiruzen's arm from the elbow. I can't believe that even when dying you would still try to stop me. Sukuna turned around to face Hiruzen's body again while putting his sandal on the former Hokage's bald head. Do you know why we have reached this moment right now, Hiruzen Sarutobi? Sukuna asked, but wasn't really expecting a response. It's because you're weak, and it's not because you're compassionate. It's that you're too compassionate. You allowed Danzo and Orochimaru to conduct their plans in the darkness, allowed them to escape even when you had the chance to kill them. You used to be different though. In the past you still had compassion, but you were also a beast. Wherever you went your enemies feared you and your might. You showed no mercy to anyone that threatened your home, whether it being invaders or traitors. But after the end of each war, when peace came, after the destruction of Uzushio, you began to lose your fierceness little by little and became more and more compassionate. And that became your downfall, Sukuna said as he removed his foot from Hiruzen's head. The people of Konoha also became relaxed and arrogant, believing themselves to be the best and in the right, simply because of famous people such as Hashirama Senju, Tobirama Senju, the Yellow Flash, the White Fang, the Sannin and yourself. You let people push you around like a puppet on strings and let problems after problems form, piling up more mistakes on your shoulders. Then Sukuna raised his left arm and pointed his index finger at Hiruzen. Chakra began to form around it as Sukuna kept speaking. Even though you're dead, I will tell you this. Konoha is going to fall, but its will of fire died 50 years ago along with Uzushio. And with that Sukuna released a barrage of chakra bullets. When they touched Hiruzen, is created a huge explosion, consuming Hiruzen's body and about 50 feet of ground around him. The explosion could be heard throughout the village, and everyone, both Konoha and Kurokashi, paused as they looked towards the mushroom cloud smoke form in the air, with his back facing Shingon and his eyes on the rising smoke. Notify the Kurokashi. We're leaving the village now. With their forces decimated by half, we'll wait and see what the other nations and villages will do before planning our next move. Jakuna ordered. Yes, sire, Shingon replied as a portal leading into darkness opened behind them. As they entered it, more portals opened over the village for the Kurokashi to enter. Quickly the Takyagari people entered their respective portals, leaving Konoha, a village now in ruins. What if Naruto is neglected by the family Uzumaki sword? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel, and leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down, and thanks for watching the video, and see you guys in the next video.